AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Good morning and very welcome to OTB AM on a Wednesday. We're doing the natural laugh at the start of the show.
Who does that?
The other the newsreaders pretend to be on their laptop at the end of the show. That's our laugh at the start of the show.
It's a real American thing, isn't it?
It's a Colin Boohig thing. That's why we're laughing at the start of the show there. Sorry, Adrian Barry, good morning.
Morning, Shane.
Aisling O'Reilly, good morning.
Good morning, Shane.
How are things? How are you keeping?
Not too bad, all good.
A quiet night in football. Frank Lampard, it turns out, has had a rude awakening to his return as Chelsea manager. 4 games, 4 defeats, 1 goal scored, 7 conceded. It's not going to plan, is it, for Todd Bowley or for Frankie?
No. No. Definitely not for Todd Bowley. I would argue less so on Frank. It's not that he obviously... There's a weirdness about this whole story. It's a very complex thing that we could probably spend a couple of hours talking about, I think. But
let's do that, Adrian.
If only we had a show that lasted 2.5 hours. We could really get into this. It just feels like there's a weird sort of a laughing at Frank stuff going on. From fans, certainly a little bit of in the media, like he's a bit of a caricature. People are hoping that he'll fail because they can poke a bit of fun at him. Has he really done that badly?
On his return?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
we don't know yet.
4 games.
Yeah, all 4 games. Tough games.
Two of them against Real Madrid, right? 2 of them against Real Madrid, who are scoring goals for fun. Like, even if you look at the game last night, right? If you start, the other one was it Wolves? Was the other one Wolves
and Brighton? Yeah.
Brighton are a really good team. There's any team in the league could lose to Brighton at the minute. I mean, not without Evan Ferguson at the exact minute, but generally they're a really good team, and it's not just him. They have players all over the park. So I think that everything in a bit of context here. The manager didn't lose his job because they were going very well. The manager lost his job because they were crap. So he's coming into a team who are as low as a snake's belly, as the expression goes, and haven't been playing very good football. And for all the money they spent, don't have a striker. So, you look at them last night for 60 minutes, and I thought it was a good case point, because actually I happened to be in the studio last week after the first leg, and I kind of felt for the first 15 minutes of the game last week, they were really good. They could have scored a goal inside the first 2 or 3 minutes last week. They scored 2 goals in the first 5 minutes. They could have had 3 after about 15. Now, they didn't take any of those. And last night was an extension of that across 60 minutes. Joanne had a great stat on the coverage last night that they had 86 shots for 1 goal in the month of April. So, I know... That doesn't say to me that the manager's doing something incredibly bad. That says to me that they're creating an awful lot of chances. I still don't fully understand how... So they don't have a striker.
After spending 600 million.
Yeah, and that's not Frank's fault.
No, but...
And I also don't understand how... So we say they don't have a striker as a reason why they haven't converted more of those 86 chances.
That's fair,
as a professional footballer, looking at some of the chances they got last night.
Yeah, you're like, come on.
Oh my God, you're playing football for as a professional.
That ball's fallen to Kante. That's the point. If they had bought a striker, that ball's fallen to a proper striker.
He does play too far up the pitch. Frank was a bit like that the last time he was at Chelsea. Figures that N'Golo Kante should be playing further up the pitch. I think that if they had an actual striker, they could probably rely a little bit less on that.
Were you surprised that he came back in?
Yeah. I was surprised. And by the way, it's not that I'm not all sort of singing and dancing about Frank Lampard here. I just think that he needs to be cut. He needs to be cut a bit of a break. I was surprised. I watched the Liverpool game that he was at the day before, I think, that he got announced, and I definitely thought, there's a nice shot of Frank. That's great. Now I wonder, because he's not on punditry or whatever, he must be just there for the night. And then he was obviously in a director's box, whatever. So it was a bit of a surprise the next morning, where to me, when all that sort of came out.
Well, he was supposed to be doing punditry, wasn't he, for that first game he took in charge of Chelsea? He was down to do punditry at the Real Madrid game, wasn't it? So he was down.
Was he?
I think so. Yeah,
right.
He'd been down and obviously had to change his plans. But so you can't blame Frank for taking the job. If he's going to get offered that job for the rest of the season, the amount of money he's going to get for this makes sense from his perspective. Yeah. But where
you just wonder, will it do more damage than good for his reputation as a manager?
100%.
That is a good question, and I'm going to come off like the one here who's saying that Frank Lampard is the reincarnation of a young Alex Ferguson. I'm not saying that at all. He obviously... I do believe that Chelsea is definitely a level above where he should be. I agree with that all day long.
Yes.
But neither do I think that he's the clown that he's being painted and he doesn't know what he's doing and he's fumbling around.
But who's painting him as a clown? You think the media?
just pick up a lot of the papers today and there is a bit of a sneering about, like, frankly not good enough. There's all this sort of stuff going on. There does feel to be a bit of a sneering about him. And as I said, it's not that I don't think he has shortcomings. Like, you look at the game last night, they should absolutely, unquestionably have been ahead on 60 minutes last night. There's no doubt about it. They had created a whole load of chances. The difficulty against a team like Madrid is once you concede, you have to go after the game. And I actually was impressed in some ways that they only lost 2-0 in the end because they were obviously committing more players forward. They made the substitutions. I'd be critical of them for the length of time it took them to make the substitutions. It was basically 10 minutes after Madrid scored. Everybody, the writing's on the wall after Madrid go 1-up. There's no need to hang off on your, Joao, Felix, Mudryk and Sterling come on.
What was that about? What was his decision making there? Frank does, obviously, Chelsea not having a striker is not Frank's fault, as you say. But Frank picked the team last night.
Yes.
It felt like the wrong... Obviously, hindsight's 20/20, but it felt like the wrong approach.
What if Kante had scored that goal?
You're 2-0 down. You're 2-0 down already.
But what if Kante had scored that goal and it got to 2-1? We'd be having a very different conversation, I think.
Would Sterling or Felix, or Felix as he likes to be pronounced,
is his actual name?
Of course.
As he likes to be pronounced.
His name.
Joao Felix. But if that ball had fallen to Felix or Sterling, there's a higher percentage chance that ball's end in the back of the net. So
possibly.
Is that not on Lampard then to be putting proper players in number 10 position that can score?
I wouldn't be. Look, you certainly argue that as we sit here in the cold light of day tomorrow. Today, 55, 60 minutes into the game yesterday, I wasn't thinking like that. I thought, geez, if they get a goal here, this is on. Now, the only thing is, it is Real Madrid. They've scored over their last 6 games in April so far and have scored 17 goals, right? So the idea that you're not going to concede against Madrid in a game like that in a team like Chelsea at the minute is highly unlikely anyway. But I don't know. Look,
they had 19 shots, Chelsea,
last night.
Yeah.
Like that's not a team that don't know what they're doing. I'm sorry. That, like, you can read all the reports this morning and listen to all the experts, but that is not a team that don't know what they're doing.
But sure, it's results business. You can't take charge of a team and then lose your first 4 games and expect headlines that don't.
I'm saying all this in the context that I don't think anybody could have made a case for Chelsea beating Madrid.
No, I don't. Rafa Benitez tried to do it in the papers yesterday, which I found hilarious. He was like, "This is how Liverpool or Chelsea can turn it around tonight." I'm like, come on, Rafa. I know you're desperate for a job, but this is not the way to approach it. When you're looking at the odds for next Chelsea manager, this is who will be in charge of the first game of next season. Nagelsmann is still the favourite, narrowly ahead of Luis Enrique and Mauricio Pochettino. So there's still the big names. But
any of those managers that wouldn't. Okay, 4-0 over 2 legs. Losing 2-0 to Madrid in a game of football is not a bad result. It's not a bad result. There's not an awful lot of teams in the Premier League that would come away with only a 2-0 defeat. Any of those managers that would have done any better than him over the 2 legs?
The problem now is they're not going to get Champions League football for next season, so why would any of those managers take over Chelsea? And look at the state of their squad.
Yeah, the money.
Well,
that's
the moolah. But
the moolah, I think that's like...
Yeah, but it could be a bad PR move for them. Like, you know, if you walk into a dressing room with so many characters. Sure, we were talking earlier in the season about the fact that Chelsea players have to use a couple of dressing rooms in training sessions because there's not enough room for the size of their squad. The amount of egos in that team as well. Sure, even players like Felix and Mudryk and Sterling on the bench. A lot of lads are not going to want to be there next season because they're not getting game time. They're not going to get Champions League football. We know that. So why would Nagelsmann, Enrique, Pochettino, these lads take that job? Like, Lampard is actually the 4th favourite to be permanently in charge next season. It's not the craziest idea.
It isn't. Like, it's not beyond the realms of possibility. I don't believe that the football... I'm obviously saying the chances they're creating, if they start to convert a couple of those, maybe they need a couple of players to come in.
Yeah, they need a striker. But even when you're naming out all those players, like, they've such a serious squad when you think about it, that they're actually, like, where they're sitting at the minute is actually surprising.
It's mental.
Yeah.
I just don't know how anyone could control the egos in that dressing room. Clearly Graham Potter couldn't. And I definitely felt sorry for Potter. I think Potter has more sympathy than maybe Lampard. I don't know why. There is that kind of... Lampard is a figure of ridicule to some. But Todd Bowley is the real figure of ridicule here, because I don't know how many times during the match last night the camera panned up to Bowley, and it's like he's sitting on his phone at one point just before Real opened the scoring, and then it goes up to him 2 minutes later after the goal, and he's just
Yeah.
I think that's.
dejected.
I think it's.
The unbelief.
Yeah.
He's he's not running the club.
Well, he's going into the dressing room for an hour talking to the
basically.
players.
Look, sometimes that stuff gets. I don't know. I wasn't there. Who the hell knows, right? But like the only thing we have evidence of is the amount of players he bought and the amount of money he spent, and it hasn't been the smartest move in the world. And Potter paid the price for that. Lampard is, to a degree, paying a little bit of the price now as well. Him appearing on the screen is a difficult one because, like, he's been spoken about in a way that a lot of owners don't get spoken about, and again, there's that bit of a figure of fun thing. The Madrid, on the other hand, by the way, just looked so impressive again last night. Like their calmness in front of goal. Was it Vinicius Junior who gets it, and Chelsea had a chance up the other end just before that, and they'd taken a bit of a swipe at it out of like a bit of a panic, and Courtois had come out and blocked it away. I think it was Vinicius Junior who gets it and holds on to it in that little bit of calmness, in the melee of the madness of what's going on in the box, and just a little lovely little ball in for Rodrigo, and they bury it. It's just
the second goal even as well.
Gravy.
He took his while. He had an open goal, but he took his while to tap that in. It's waiting for the challenge from the goalkeeper. So it was a perfect game management from Real. You felt like Ancelotti,
And that's what they do best.
100%.
Game management.
They were ridiculously good. A couple of comments are coming in on Chelsea here on the YouTube channel. Stephen Donlan says last time Chelsea didn't make Champions League, they still managed to get Conte in and win the league the following season. So not having Champions League football doesn't put off big managers. That's maybe a fair point. Like Chelsea, you're still a big club.
I think if you're a big manager, you sort of say to yourself, you're nearly better off going in there. Because they're
Can only go up.
Exactly. You're like a hero if you get Champions League football. You don't need to win the league even the next year.
That's why for Lampard coming in now to lift the mood at this point in the season,
it should be perfect. It should be perfect, as in it was so low under Potter. But then he comes in.
But also for him at this point, the players are just like, there's no chance. We're done. It's come close to the end. Next year, yes, okay, next season, there's more of a chance.
I was looking at the aftermath of the game last night, and I could see Lampard going around, and like Modric is over, and they're having a little bit of a chat and a hug, and Ancelotti is over, and then a bit of a chat and a hug. Like I feel a bit like there's a bit of the Roy Keanes about him. Like none of those personalities are talking to Lampard as the manager.
Yeah.
There's a game recognises game, which has nothing to do with his abilities as a manager. It's like let's just acknowledge each other here, Modric.
There's a bit of a
Roy Keane there, like.
Yeah, like what did Lampard shout across to Jurgen Klopp that time? Was it during COVID?
I remember that.
Quite clearly, could hear him shouting things to Jurgen Klopp
about
giving it all that.
Him not being a player.
Something like that, and say, you won the league last season and you're giving it the big one sort of vibe.
Yeah.
So it was a bit off.
He was a player, of course, but not at that level.
At the high level. Colin making the point that Chelsea appointment of Conte, that was 2016-17, and there were fewer appealing jobs, which is maybe also accurate. But there's a lot of big managers available.
Oh yeah.
Like it's probably a time to go for these lads, but I don't know. Is it Winstanley? Is the Paul Winstanley and Lawrence Stewart are the co-sporting directors of Chelsea? They're the ones who decided to get rid of Graham Potter. Their names kind of go under the radar a little bit.
In what sense?
They made the decision to get rid of Potter now.
Oh, yeah.
Like there is the argument out there that maybe they should have held on to Graham Potter. Like you just can't keep firing and hiring managers. It doesn't work like that. Well, that's clearly the likes of Todd Bowley has no problem doing it. But
we were told that was the one thing we were told about Todd Bowley when he takes over. He loves a long-term project. There'll be no Graham Potter, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it.
That was the whole thing with Graham Potter. That's what you're here to do, develop the
You'll be
team.
absolutely fine.
a few of the comments. Noel Cal, you can blame him. Yes, you can blame him. His arrogance to believe he's good enough, maybe admit he's not good enough. I assume you're talking about Lampard there. Michael says maybe Chelsea are paying the price for the changing of the owners.
He's not going to come out and say, what do you expect him to do? What do you expect him to say? Like, he's not going to come out and go, yeah, listen, I'm not up to this.
100%. And even last night, I'm just reading his quotes from after the match last night. He says, I won't let anyone off the hook in terms of seeing this season out. It has to be the opposite. He's talking about how many crosses they had, how many chances they had, how many shots they had.
Yeah, didn't he say they were about the better team?
He's essentially
he was saying they were the better team for 60 minutes. You can make that case.
You could make that case. Well, last night was
it's not crazy thought.
It was the most promising performance of the four so far under Lampard. So you have to give him the next. It's Brentford, I think, next for them. I mean,
it's not gonna.
That's not an easy Premier League game to try and bounce back and get a 3 points in.
No easy games that level, Shane.
No easy games. It's a game of two halves as well, actually.
Yeah.
45 minutes. Any other cliches you want to throw in there?
Got to stick the ball in the onion sack.
You do,
et cetera.
yeah. The onion sack. I like that one. I usually go with the onion bag, but we'll stick that one in as well. What else we want to talk about? The GPA have a report out today. Now this was it feels like that's something we've seen before, but also it's quite concerning. So some of the top level stuff from this GPA report found that only 9.5% of inter-county women's players receive travel expenses versus 100% of the male players. Also found that 80% don't have regular access to a doctor, and 48% paid to see a physio with average cost of €220. There's talk about access to pitches as well. 70% of female inter-county players reported difficulties accessing pitches, and there are calls to compensate female players for costs incurred from this year onwards. It's on the back page of a lot of the newspapers this morning as well. Even the back of the Indo there has GPA seek more Croker funds to end inequality in female codes. A lot of quotes from the GPA CEO Tom Parsons, but guys, this is fairly stark when you read the figures here.
Yeah, I don't know, I'm not really that surprised though. You should be a bit more surprised, but I don't think I am. Like, just to think about the Meath Camogie players, they played in Croke Park last weekend in the league final against Kerry, lost by a point in the end, but up until that game they were going around the country trying to find pitches for their training. They don't have a set base, so yeah, I think things like this are happening maybe across the country. And on the expenses as well, I maybe thought maybe that had changed. 2023, we'd often heard the terrible stories up to now, but I definitely thought there was more of an improvement there. But I don't know how players do that when a lot of them nowadays, the inter-county age is dropping. They're in college, they're either only coming out of leaving cert, some are only doing their leaving cert. How would they have the funds to get themselves to and from trainings, to get themselves to matches, to wherever it is, to get on the bus to go to matches? It's very tough. It's their parents are having to do it, obviously, and that's not easy in the times that we're in at the minute. So yeah, not on, because a lot goes into being an inter-county player, and then on top of all of that, to be having to worry about travel expenses. So yeah, it's terrible to hear those figures, but yeah, not overly surprised though.
Who are the dissenting voices against this happening? I just can't understand. There was a bit of me that looked at the paper this morning and I thought, is that a paper from like 3 years ago that is one
Groundhog Day,
like there's obviously this conversation that's gone on in the background that is Mary McAleese is heading up that committee where they're trying to obviously merge them all,
merge together,
things together. Which again, like, I know there are obviously bits and pieces you need to get through, but like I can't, I was looking at she was at the Agreement 25 thing that was up in Queen's University, Belfast, 25 years since the Belfast Agreement, and I was watching the George Mitchell speech last night, which, by the way, I appreciate it's a bit of a tangent here, an unbelievable watch, and I highly recommend it to go and look at. But she was hosting a panel after that, and she's obviously involved with trying to piece that thing together. I don't know what voices in the room are saying, like, here, should we, what's stopping that happening, number one? And just on this bit, like George Mitchell was talking about, sort of like he managed to get everybody in that the types of people and how at opposite ends of the scale they were to get them in a room and get that hammered out over a couple of years. This has been going on for forever since the games existed. I just don't understand how they couldn't, even almost separate to that other process of uniting the organisations, how couldn't they get everybody in a room? I just don't know what the counterpoint, if all the stakeholders are sat around a table, who's saying, well, we can't do this, or here's the reason not to do that? It just doesn't.
What are the hurdles?
Just get it done.
That's the only way we're going to see change. Like 9.5%.
That's bizarre, isn't it?
To 100% for men. Like, that is quite crazy when you think about it. But yeah, it's unbelievable, really. But yeah, bringing them together, merging them, that's the only way I could see really positive improvement. But
could they get this done ahead of that, would be what I would ask. Like, twin track them, separate that one. Like, I don't know what the hurdles to getting that done. Again, on the face of it, look, I'm probably very naive. I can't see why everybody has a thirst to get it done. Just go and get it done. But to just get this done, because they were talking, like, the big thing in the paper today is about trying to get it done by 2024. And I don't know what the timeline for the merging of the organisations would be. It would appear that it might be slightly longer than that. So on the basis of 2024, they're going to have to do it in parallel or separately. I just... go ahead and get it done.
Yeah, like, do it now.
If there's a will to get it done,
which there clearly is.
Yeah.
I think you were making the point before the show, Aisling, like the fact that people forget that these players, male and female players, but clearly it's a bigger issue for female players because they're not getting the same financial support. They have things to pay for. They have bills. They have mortgages, some of them.
It would turn you away from playing.
100%.
Because maybe you just can't do it. Like a lot of these girls can't afford to play an amateur game because they can't get themselves to and from training or to get themselves to the bus to go to the game or whatever it is. And it's not fair to do this to families, to parents, to have to put that on them. And, I'm sure that they would like to, if they can, be able to, have their child playing. So, yeah, it's just unreal, but it's been going on for so long. Like, I remember years ago being involved, and this was always the way. You didn't get any expenses, and it was tough. And
what about access to pitches? Like, were there clear preferences for the male teams?
Yeah, there always would have been. I think that's well known. Like, they maybe got the first pitch and you'd get maybe the second pitch, that sort of thing. They'd have food after training. We used to sort of, and in fairness, it was probably a sound thing on their behalf. We didn't have the funds obviously within the LGFA, so it was the GA that had the money in Meath, so they basically would have their food and stuff after training, and we used to go in after, and if there was like
scraps,
when they're, well, I wouldn't say that, but like that, they basically would, they would let us come in then, but we didn't have our own. We just got to, basically what was not leftovers, because it was perfectly good food, but like maybe there was too much. So that's the food that we got then.
But that's desperate.
But now I'm talking 2017, so I would think that there's been a lot of change since then. Obviously, we've seen the heights that Meath have gone to, so they're in a total different place to that. But I would say there is other counties that are not. Like, you've heard about Cavan, like a lot of talk about the Cavan ladies this year, and they just wanted the expenses, what they were told they were going to get.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of stories, I would say, around the country, of players not getting their expenses, maybe not getting food after training, things like that. Do you think our basics,
you would think
basic rights to
like
have, I would say?
The quotes in the paper, so Mary McAleese and Tom Parsons, along the same lines, basically, they know that the finances are there within the GA to take female sports forward. So I think Parsons is quoting in excess of 150 million euros a year. When you consolidate it, he says players' expenses are 4 or 5% of that, because it's an amateur game. Half of revenue in other professional sports goes on salaries, so we don't have that cost. So he's saying even if the travel expenses on the men's side is increased or doubled to 8%, it's still the deal of a lifetime. The revenue is there. It's hard to argue with that. The money is there within the GA to make this happen.
Matthew Hanlon, who's the co-chair, obviously, since the GA and the GPA were merged. We want negotiations to start as soon as possible, so the consistent workable charter is in place for 2024 onwards. And you just wonder, like, obviously the foundations, the GPA were very militant. An old strike, or a threat of a strike every now and then was something that got thrown out.
Yeah.
Like, at some point or another, this can't go on for the players. Like, they will need to, at some point, if there's not a will being shown on all sides for people to get around the table and to actually get something done about it, maybe they just need to take more of a hardline approach.
I'd say there's drastic change from county to county though, and I'd say that's probably the thing. So you might see the top few counties are maybe getting their expenses and stuff. We'll have to look into this, but I would say there's a lot that are getting nothing. So I'd say it's quite a divide to when you have the strike, some are happy, some aren't, that sort of thing. So
Grace Walsh is in the paper. She's being quoted at this GPA report launched, the Kilkenny Camogie captain, and she's saying you're just treated less than your male counterparts, and that again feels like Groundhog Day. This feels like a story that's cropped up a number of times over the years. Even when you look at things like sports science, so I've already mentioned access to physios, strength and conditioning expertise, medical professionals, and then the training, playing gear, and the nutritional expenses. We saw the Telegraph report on the women's rugby team last week. Even access to protein ahead of the Tour of Japan last year. So this is something that has cropped up in Irish sport across codes. Like, it's just the playing field, you feel like in the last couple of years, every so often we pat ourselves in the back and we're like, this is getting better. We're definitely moving in the right direction. Then all of a sudden you see a report like this and you're like, are we?
Yeah, I think it even stems from like underage. I think that's where you start seeing it. Like, I'd often hear like conversations within clubs and they'd be deciding who gets what pitches, say.
Yeah.
And like, I've heard of clubs giving their minor lads team the front pitch because maybe they have more supporters than the senior women's team.
Jeez.
That has been excuses that I've heard. And they think they're legit. They're telling you the excuse going, what, really? Like, these are stories that I've heard not that long ago, close enough to last season. So I think it stems from underage the whole way up of, they basically think, they're better quality games. I don't know.
But even, was it Anna Capeless on the show? Apologies if it wasn't.
Friday
she was talking about the even meetings at rugby level where they discuss the men's first team and maybe the seconds and then the thirds and then maybe the under 20s, and then they'll get into down the age groups in the boys section down to the mini leagues, and it's any other business at that stage, and the women's team is maybe thrown in, or someone has to put their hand up and say, well, what about the women's team? Are we going to discuss the issues there? So like, and look, I'm sure that doesn't happen at every single rugby club or GAA club across the country, but unquestionably there are GAA clubs and rugby clubs across the country that treat the women's game like that. Like, I even know GAA clubs at home where the ladies team is almost separate entity completely to the men's team, and it's treated like that in the club. You look at the name of the club and you're thinking, right, that's the men's team and that's the women's team, but they're different entities in so many ways, and that's where the merger, I guess, comes in.
The fact that they're called ladies, I have to say, for me,
completely.
it's just
I often say it and I'm like, why am I even saying it?
I refuse to say it.
Yeah.
It's dinosaur stuff.
Yeah.
Like, if they want to go down that route, then call it the gentleman's. It's just.
Yeah, no, I say it so many times because that is what it is called. That's
we've been hammered home to say
the
it,
name of it. But like, I'm like, ladies, like, we would never say that to each other.
From the get-go, like, it's...
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
It's wrong.
Let us know in the comments what you make of all that in the GPA report. We'll of course cover that story more heavily across the rest of the week. OTB AM at 7:56 AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now. I did want to talk about Monaghan. Aisling, you were at the match. That's why Adrian. Don't look at me.
Adrian.
Don't be like, oh, this lad's talking about Monaghan again. We wanted to talk about it because Aisling, like myself, was at Healy Park.
Come on, Shay. Don't throw me under the bus here.
That's
the excuse.
It's all me.
Aisling messaged said, I was at in the pre-show meeting. And Shane was like, Grant, that's half an hour on that.
Yeah. You're also at Fermanagh Dairy, of course, as well. Which
we'll talk about that.
No, let's get to Monaghan first. What did you make of it? It was...
what a game!
What a game! This whole phrase "saved football" has been thrown around, but it wasn't.
Who's throwing that around?
It's been. I was listening to the lads in the news round last night, and they were discussing the.
It was an unbelievable game. I think we needed, that sort of kick-start to the championship because I was at the Derry Fermanagh game the day before and it just lacked all sense of atmosphere. There was no championship buzz whatsoever, unfortunately. But the Monaghan Tyrone, it's always a good game in Healy Park. Anytime I go, it seems to either go to extra time or... Yeah, it's brilliant. But 5 points down at half time. I thought Monaghan, they're not at the races. I thought Tyrone, they looked really, really fit. I thought they'd gone
easier Tyrone in the first half.
Gone to a new level. I just thought, no, Tyrone are ones to watch here. That's the way I was feeling in the first half. And then, we actually seen Monaghan come to life then in the second half. And what a finish.
But it was ridiculous at the end of the game that any self-respecting team in terms of Tyrone, what happened at that last with the goal, the parting of the seas, I honestly couldn't believe it. I was looking at the TV going,
defending like,
somebody's going to come out now at some point and put a challenge in here. Like, it was crazy.
He had that much space to begin with.
Just waltzed straight
Very
through.
smart run. Like,
he lost Niall Sludden. Sludden was keeping an eye over his shoulder, but then got drawn towards the ball and obviously gave O'Toole the space. But they should have known that if they had
even long before that with the move.
Yeah.
Just the fact that it all went, it was like we've knocked it over the bar, wasn't it? It was a point for Tyrone.
And
then it was like, okay, cool, we've
won the match.
Like, yeah.
Well, it was get 15 men behind the ball and Monaghan won't get through us. But Carl O'Connell, who was brilliant all game, just kept running through that Tyrone defence and breaking through. Kieran Duffy gets on the ball. And Kieran Duffy he might be a corner back, but he's often the man at the end of Monaghan moves who takes the pot shot, and he's a very accurate shooter for a corner back. So I was thinking when Kieran Duffy gets the ball, kick it over the bar quick. Yeah. But obviously then you see Ryan O'Toole inside, and then once Ryan O'Toole gets the ball, I'm like, all right, fist it over the bar.
Yeah.
Just hurry up and fist it. And as he bared it on goal, I was like, what the hell is he doing? What is he doing? But I watched the Mayo game previous in the last game. He did the exact same goal, came from the same position and just buried it. Now this was different. This was an occasion where you're like, he has to fist it over the bar.
Yeah. And when I spoke to him after, he said I was 1-on-1. Like I had to go for it. He almost felt like, that's the way I've been trained. 1-on-1. I'll get in trouble not to go for a goal here.
But even
you weren't 1-on-1. He wasn't 1-on-1.
There was a Tyrone defender on the goal line as well. Like, he was like, you have to live in the moment and stuff. His quotes afterwards were like...
Well, I was listening to that. I was definitely like, Jesus. Right? I thought like there would have been a part of him sort of half second guessing himself, but he was probably
full of confidence. Yeah, his championship debut. Unbelievable.
I'm sorry, the celebration.
I know.
As soon as the ball hits the net, he runs off and starts doing this. It's like, I don't even know what it means, but cash money I guess.
Money,
but Monaghan were certainly in the money at full time, and it was quite a buzz leaving
there was a good few videos popped up. Aisling, I don't know if you were paying much attention. You probably weren't, very you were busy, but there was a lot of people that, like, during the game were taking videos of what was going on. Some of these people now even, and we don't want to mention any names, but some of these people even have been really vocal about telling fans that they shouldn't be taking video at games, and yet here they were.
No way, I didn't see this.
Taking video of some of the games.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
All right.
Come on, Shane.
So what Adrian is getting to, folks, is right. I took a video at the end of the match just to catch.
The match was still on.
See, I thought the whistle went.
No.
And then clearly the referee, ridiculously by the way, played way too much time and gave Tyrone a couple of opportunities to launch the ball into the box.
So what did you get on the camera?
I got
nothing. He was at the opposite end of the pitch. You couldn't see him.
But I got the Monaghan fans.
The goal went in.
The buzz in the stand as the full-time whistle.
Okay,
which,
right.
I mean, I wanted to experience that. I wanted.
It's okay,
hold
Shane,
on
to
to it
say
for perpetuity.
That, you've relented from your ridiculous previous position.
This is different to LeBron James breaking the record and everyone with the phones out as he takes the shot. That's different. I didn't have the phone out when Ryan O'Toole was pulling the trigger.
Were you able to do this? Were you able to do that and then also look at the game at the same time?
Of course I was.
So
I'm a natural social media man.
Just
you know.
I had to actually stand up because in Healy Park a lot of the time, if you're not in the actual press box across the way, then you're in amongst the fans, which is actually I enjoy. Yeah. But I had to stand up for most of that because they were all stood up getting out of their seats once the Ryan O'Toole had scored. So I was like, I can't even see the game. Yeah, so everyone was just standing.
It's if I had filmed the O'Toole goal, Adrian, I acknowledge, I would have put forward my resignation on the show on Monday morning. Yeah, I would have said I resign my position.
Unlikely, Shane. Unlikely.
Nah, you would have got like.
There's an awful lot more video. There's definitely an awful lot more video on your phone than your. This is a latter day stance.
No
doubt about it. No doubt about it.
You can have my phone if you want, Adrian. That was the only video or photo I took of the whole occasion on Sunday. I have to say, and it was tempting. It was tempting the whole way home as well when you're driving back and everyone is just buzzing. Monaghan people love beating Tyrone. I think every county in Ulster loves beating Tyrone. There is that little thing.
And that's a compliment to beat them this year in Healy Park.
Yeah, well there you go. And Monaghan beat Mayo in Castlebar as well. I'm not saying it's Monaghan's year, folks, but they'll have certainly.
Oh no,
scalps.
relax now.
They'll have scalps.
I'm glad you said it, Ashley.
No. I'm not saying it's their year, but I do think
their year for what, like?
Well, to have a serious whack.
What does that even
mean?
At
Ulster?
That's like a classic GA
They're certainly going to have
phrase.
a whack at Ulster, but the Monaghan Derry game is going to be fantastic the week after next. And I can't pick a winner from that one. But certainly.
Well, Aisling, come on, you jump in here because I'm.
It's funny with Derry. A lot of people are like, yeah, they're certs now, but I just am fully on the bandwagon when I was very much on it last year. I just have to probably see a little bit more. You can't tell enough from the Fermanagh game, to be honest.
The long balls in.
Yeah, they're not just some of the balls over the top. I think they would have got caught. Fermanagh didn't catch them enough of the time that they should have. They had so many opportunities to a better team would have, but at the same time, do I think that they'll beat Monaghan? If it comes to that, Oh, it comes to that. They're in semi-final. Sorry.
That's the thing. It feels like there's not. Whatever team loses that semi-final, I wouldn't be too concerned as a Monaghan fan if Monaghan lost. If you lose by a few points and you still play reasonably well. And then you have still your 3 weeks to prepare for the group phase. I don't think it's the end of the world.
No.
It would be lovely to win Ulster this year, but I mean...
Like Tyrone now 5 weeks.
Yeah, which is nearly too much time.
A long time.
That's a lot of players going back to club football, you'd imagine, in Tyrone. I know they love their club football in Tyrone, so they will probably go back, most of them. Give them the next week or two off, possibly, because 3 weeks is more than enough time to prep for that.
Yeah, 5 weeks is a lot of time. I don't know, you could look at it both ways to have a bit of time to... work on things, really get yourself right. Mayo, I'm sure, looking at it like that, but at the same time not having that, match games. It's just tough, I think, to be at that level.
Chris on YouTube here is saying, talking about dinosaurs using the term ladies, while at the same time calling the GFA, as in the Good Friday Agreement, the Belfast Agreement. Mary McAleese herself called it the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, so I'm just putting that in the record.
The great Mary McAleese.
Covering myself, actually. That's
100%. On that note, Adrian, thanks a million.
Cheers.
For popping in, as always. 8:04 AM on this Wednesday morning's OTB AM. Now, we will be hosting a live UEFA Champions League roadshow in partnership with Just Eat. It's coming your way on May the 3rd. It'll be in the Mansion House in Dublin. We will be joined by UEFA Champions League winners John O'Shea and Wes Brown, along with Arsenal legend Paul Merson. It is sure to be a brilliant night's entertainment. This is an exclusive off-air event and tickets are limited, so don't delay. Go to offtheball.com/events and we will see you on the night. Just Eat, the official food delivery partner of the UEFA Champions League. Now up next, we're talking Champions League with the ESPN senior writer Mark Ogden.
OTB AM.
The Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball. The Football Pod are hitting the road again, and we're delighted to announce that we're heading to Killarney for our first big show of the summer. All with thanks to AIB.
It was quality. It was a good one.
Join us for a brilliant night of football, chat and crack, with plenty of focus on the All-Ireland champions Kerry and the contenders who are coming for their throne.
Does it keep you up at night with not winning Sam Maguire?
No.
This is an exclusive off-air event and tickets are limited, so don't delay.
We have a great show ahead. We are going to get our special guests out tonight.
Tickets are €20, including booking fee. Go to offtheball.com/event now. The Football Pod, in partnership with AIB. Check out #TheToughest for more.
Fighting Words, Ukrainian Action in Ireland and the Irish Red Cross have come together to host an exciting concert by some of the best loved artists from both Ireland and Ukraine at Vicar Street on Monday 24th of April. Come show your support with more than 20 great Irish and Ukrainian artists including Glenn Hansard and Colin McInumra, Kathy Davey, Roddy Doyle and Paul Muldoon, all taking part in support of the millions who have been forced to flee Ukraine. A concert for Ukraine at Vicar Street Monday 24th of April. Tickets on sale from Ticketmaster at just €25 or go to vicarstreet.com.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
6 minutes past 8 on this Wednesday morning's OTBM, and myself and Ashley are with you right through until 10 a.m. this morning. We are talking Champions League and delighted to be joined on the line this morning by the ESPN senior writer Mark Ogden. Morning, Mark. How are things?
Hi, Shane. Yeah, I'm good. Thanks. Good.
Thanks a lot for joining us. I know you were in Naples last night for Napoli's exit and AC Milan's progression to the Champions League semi-finals for the first time since 2007. Feisty atmosphere, I'd imagine, between these two. Mark, how was it on the night?
It was, yeah. And I've started at the time thinking that Napoli would go through. I thought Napoli was a great story, but I just think over the two legs, and especially last night, they just looked like a team that just run out of steam. Especially Kvaratskhelia, who's been brilliant this season. One of the players of the season, but he obviously missed his penalty last night, and you had the fact that he's now done 6 games without a goal or an assist, which he's not like in the season. I just think he kind of sums up what's happened to Napoli. They just had a really, really tough, hard season. They're going to win Serie A, but I just think they've hit the wall just when they needed to kind of push on in the Champions League. Probably highlights how tough it is to compete on the two fronts. They, of course, have the Serie A title all but wrapped up. So it's one of those things, I guess, Mark, that as you mentioned, Kvaratskhelia, like he has been brilliant all season, but these players are going to get tired as well, and Osimhen is another who has lit the place up, but it was tough for them last night. It was, yeah. I mean, bear in mind they were without Kimi was suspended, Anguissa was suspended. They had a couple of players that injured in the first half last night. Osimhen was playing his first game in almost a month, and it just felt a bit of a patch-up job, and it certainly wasn't the Napoli that we saw at the start of the season. I mean, I remember the Liverpool game in Naples, they absolutely blew them away, and they just lacked that. I mean, they created plenty of chances, but they lacked that kind of that zip, that burst of energy which they had. But, in fairness to Milan, it was like watching the old Milan. It was like watching, Baresi and Maldini at times, where they defended and where they were organised. It was a real kind of classic example of how to defend a lead away from home in the Champions League, and they did that, and it was a brilliant display by Milan, and they have to give them credit for that. And I think, obviously, people look forward to their semi-final, probably against Inter, which is, a massive game. But I do think that the winners will come from the other side of the draw, probably Real Madrid or Man City, to be fair. Yeah, you would imagine it's kind of shaping up that way for sure. You described AC Milan's performance last night in your piece on ESPN as smart, and I think that was a perfect word to summarise it, because it was just game management at its best. Olivier Giroud, once again, Mark, stepping up with the goal. He did, and missed the penalty as well, to be fair. Missed a good chance, but Giroud just keeps on going, and he's a player that he does get better with age. I think the experience he's got and his wisdom, and I just think he is a perfect player for that. It's quite a young team in places the Man side, and I think he adds something. He's not. You look at the way he plays, and he's not the quickest, and he's not very mobile, but his goals record is outstanding. It really is. He's the top scorer all time for France, but then you look, but he's no Thierry Henry. But whatever it is about Giroud, he scores goals, and he's there again last night in a big atmosphere. I think for me as well, I think that obviously Osimhen coming back was a big thing for Napoli, and Milan just, Pioli's tactics, he had Simon Kjaer and Fikayo Tomori marking Osimhen, and apart from that goal he scored, 3rd minute into stoppage time, he was really quiet. Bearing in mind he had been injured, but I just thought Milan did a really good job, and everyone talks about how great it is to watch people like Pep Guardiola, City team, and Liverpool and the club, how exciting they are, but it is quite exciting at times to watch a team like Milan defend like they did last night, and it shows you that there is an art to defending, and it's often underpraised, I should say, that the fact that teams get defending done properly.
Yeah, Mark, I felt they were very defensively solid. That was probably one of the most impressive parts of their game. And I think going forward, like first semi-final since 2007, it's exciting times for Milan.
It is. Like I say, you look at the team, you look at where they're going in Serie A, thinking, the 4th or 20 odd points behind Naples, how can they be in the Champions League semi-final? But sometimes it's what big clubs do, whether it's the badge or the strip, it motivates the players. I was in the San Siro last week, I just felt that Milan felt that they were on their own turf. It was like, right, with Champions League quarter-final, this is our place. And Napoli were kind of feeling the way a little bit, despite the fact that Napoli are the better team. And I just think sometimes when you get the history of a club like Milan, you just feel comfortable in that scenario. And they just looked comfortable last night. And I mean, the point I made in the piece last night is that obviously everyone talks about the miracle of Istanbul in 2005 and what a great game it was for Liverpool. People don't often talk about what happened to Milan, and for them to go back to the final in Istanbul this year, 18 months later, some sort of redemption, that'd be a fairy tale for them. But for a big club Milan, and I suppose if ever they get in the semi-finals and they get to the final, they won't be fazed by it.
For anyone who hasn't seen the highlights, I'd urge you to go back, especially and watch Rafael Leao's run for that Giroud goal. He just takes off and turns on the turbos. It was brilliant. What's the atmosphere, Mark, around Naples when it comes to Victor Osimhen? Because there's all the talk that he might be heading off in the summer. Manchester United seem to be one of the clubs that are certainly being linked with his signature, and I guess that's a position in which they need to improve. But is the feeling that he will leave?
Well, I mean, I spoke to a couple of fans in the town yesterday, and the feeling on the fans that definitely not, he won't leave. Whether it's naivety or just being a bit blind to the truth, but I do think that, you talk about 100 million euros at least as a starting point for Osimhen, so that's big money that Napoli probably can't turn down, even if they win Serie A and get back in the Champions League. And over the years, Napoli have moved players on, people like Cavani moved on, Lavezzi, so I think they probably would accept an offer for Osimhen, but, they won't want to accept one for Kvaratskhelia as well, so it's a case of which one do they sell this summer. But obviously Bayern Munich need a striker, Man United need a striker, and they're both big clubs with big money. So, I mean, last night he was poor last night, but he's been out for a month, so you can't really judge him on that. But I do think that, you look around the strikers that might be available this summer, you're probably looking at Osimhen and maybe Harry Kane, and beyond that, maybe Vlahovic at Juventus, but I think Osimhen and Kane are obviously the big two. So I'd be very surprised if he stays at Napoli, because you have some very big and ambitious clubs chasing his signature.
Yeah, and only back from injury as well. Where do you rate him in terms of the type of centre forward he is? I read reports that he's one of the strongest centre forwards in Europe, maybe behind Haaland at the minute. Would you agree with that, Mark, or where would you rate him?
I still put him behind Harry Kane. I mean, obviously Haaland at the top, but I still put him behind Kane, and people like Marcelo Storz have goals. I think with Osimhen, he's got great pace. He's got strength, but I think that there will be a question mark over him, rightly or wrongly, because he's doing Serie A, and I think it hasn't been the best league over the years for producing strikers. We all saw Romelu Lukaku destroyed Serie A a couple of years ago. Either side has not been great at Man United and Chelsea, so I do think Osimhen's got the credentials and the quality to do better than that. But it is a question mark. He'll have to answer that. So can he do it in the Premier League where it is so intense? But Haaland's done it. Kane does it regularly, so I don't think he'll have a major problem. But I think it is something that, at the moment, means he's not quite at the level of Haaland and Kane. Lewandowski, great striker over the years. I think I think time's catching up with him now. But I do think that those are the top two in terms of Haaland and Kane, with Osimhen behind those two.
The other game last night, of course, Mark, and we touched on it heavily at the top of the show this morning, was Chelsea's exit at the hands of Real Madrid, 4-0 in aggregate. And look, it's been a rude awakening to life as caretaker manager for Frank Lampard. 4 games now, 4 defeats. Only 1 goal scored in those 4 games as well. Were you surprised that Frank Lampard was the man that Todd Bowley and co went for between now and the end of the season?
Well, in the real world, I was very surprised. In the Todd Bowley world, I wasn't surprised at anything, because you just don't know what is coming down the track at Chelsea at the moment, because they've made some strange decisions all season. From sacking Thomas Tuchel, appointing Graham Potter. It's just been a long case of decisions made without the experience that you need to make them, or the knowledge maybe. So the idea of bringing Lampard into, it's the old classic steady the ship because he knows the club kind of thing. And his last 12 games with Everton, last 9. He was sacked at Chelsea 2 years ago. Frank Lampard has no credentials to manage Chelsea apart from the fact he used to play for them. So it was a bad move, and it's almost like tarnishing Lampard's legacy because it's 4 straight defeats now, like you say. I don't know the next game is again. I think might be Brentford next week, which they could lose as well. So, what they need right now is a win, just a win of any kind, whether it's in the Champions League or anything. So they're in an absolute mess. They're not going to be any kind of European football next season. They've got lots of players to move on. I think Lampard will be well out of it in the summer when he finishes his caretaker stint. But I just wouldn't trust Todd Bowley and his advisors to get the right manager in the summer to make them what they need to be, which is one of the Premier League's top 4 clubs and a club in the Champions League.
I know you've been writing earlier this month about the names, as many as 7 names on Chelsea's shortlist. They included Nagelsmann, Enrique. You have Maurizio Pochettino, of course, in there as well, Ancelotti, and the sporting manager Ruben Amorim being mentioned as well. Is it still a lucrative job? Because, of course, they won't have Champions League football next season, and yet it's still a massive club, and it's in London.
Yeah, it's a top job, Chelsea, for all those reasons you say. And they're not in the Champions League, but they'll aspire to be in the Champions League. And a manager that's a good coach could look at that squad and think there's some really good players here. Just need to get them working as a unit, which might be easier said than done because they've been put together almost like they've been thrown at a dartboard. But it's a great job, Chelsea, because it's probably London's biggest club in the eyes of European coaches. I mean, I know Arsenal and Tottenham have got the history, but I think Chelsea, because of where it is and because of what it's done over the last 20 years, they are a super club, Chelsea. So it's a job that out-of-work coaches will be falling over themselves to get. So I don't think they'll have any concerns on that point. But, as you saw with Man United over the years since Ferguson retired, if you make one bad mistake, it leads to another and another, and before you know it, 10 years is gone, and you've basically fallen way behind your rivals. So that would be my concern if I was a Chelsea fan, because Todd Bowling does kind of have similarities to Ed Woodward in terms of making emotional decisions that, like I said, don't really have any kind of basis in reality. So it's an interesting one to watch, Chelsea. And can I just go back very quickly on the Osimhen thing? I didn't mention Karim Benzema as one of the best strikers, I think, before people say Karim Benzema. I've got to mention Karim Benzema.
Yeah, unbelievable. He is, absolutely. But even just when we were talking about Frank Lampard there, Mark, I often wonder, will this do more damage than good for his managerial career or whatever he goes on to do after this? It's not a good look, and obviously money talks. He obviously will be well paid for this, but really in terms of his management career, you can't see it being a positive experience. No,
it didn't do any good, really. I mean, let's be honest, it was, his reputation was pretty low after Everton because it went really bad at Everton. And, on a personal level, Frank Lampard is one of the good guys. He's a guy that will engage with the fans, with the media. He's not one of these that will kind of be abrupt or aloof, but you've got to say that Everton went so badly wrong that he was very lucky to get the Chelsea job, and he's not actually doing anything at Chelsea to suggest that what happened at Everton was a blip. So I don't know where Lampard goes from here. I really don't. I think it's going to be tough for him. He's already had his dream job with Chelsea, so after failing at Everton, what is he going to get? He's probably not going to get a Premier League job. He ain't going to get the England job, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing for him. And I don't know. I just think he'll end up being a TV pundit because I just don't see where he goes in management. I just think he's got too much failure on his CV at a young age. He's not really achieved anything. Let's be honest. I mean, he didn't even get Derby promoted. So nice guy, good guy, but I just think management isn't for him.
We've got a comment in on our YouTube channel from David. Says, can anyone name a club where the owner has publicly involved themselves directly in team performance and it's gone well? What did you make of the dressing room decision by Todd Bowley to go in and speak to the players? I mean, some of the reports were saying he was in there for an hour and pointing out certain players' performances, using words like embarrassing. Is this a very bad look for Todd Bowley and Chelsea?
Well, it's a bad look when they're losing. I mean, I think Lampard made a really good point in his press conference of the day when he was asked about that, and he said, "Look, Roman Abramovich used to come in all the time, and that when he was there, and he was there for 20 years, and under Abramovich, Chelsea were pretty successful. So, I think Abramovich knew that there's probably a time and a place to go in, and if he wanted to, let out some steam and criticise players, he would do it. But he would do it when Abramovich did it. He knew that he meant it. With Todd Bowley, he's probably thinking that, now who is this guy? I mean, who is he? What has he done to come in and tell us that we're doing things wrong? Because yes, he's the the co-owner. Yes, he's a billionaire, but his background is baseball, and it's a different sport. And I think the problem is he's coming to football thinking that he can apply the methods that he's used in baseball and US sport in football, and it's a totally different environment. And I think when you come into that dressing room and you start having a go at players, if you had any respect in the first place, you lose it because you're not doing it from a position of strength or credentials. I'd imagine when Abramovich came into the dressing room that the players were, sat up straight and listening, because whatever his faults, the guy had, delivered success at Chelsea, and the players knew that his methods was working. With Todd Bowley, none of his methods have worked. So I suppose the players are thinking, well, you can't have a go at us for making mistakes because you're making them every day.
Can I just finally ask you, Mark, before we let you go, I know you've been writing about the so-called prospective sale of Manchester United. Joel and Avram Glazer increasingly confident of securing this outside investment. Not the news Manchester United fans want to hear, because that would mean that they could stay on as United owners and potentially look to double the value of the club, as they say, over the next decade. I know there's a deadline of April 28th for third bids. The word greed is coming to mind here, and I'm sure a lot of United fans will use that one. Is it feeling like it's heading this direction, that the Glazers might stay put?
Yeah, I mean, I did a piece in February when I wrote that people were contacting the Rain Group, the bank that are in charge of it, and they were telling me that they're kind of sceptical of the Glazers' motives, that they didn't really think they would sell. And honestly, I got heaps of views on social media from fans about that, but it's not because I want it to happen, it's because that's what I was told. So sometimes you have to accept that there can be an uncomfortable truth if you don't like it, and that is the situation with the Glazers right now, that even if you just take away your emotional attachment to it, and you look at the fact that I think now four hedge funds and investment banks have made public their desire to get involved, but it's not to buy the club, it's to help invest and to help support the owners, which is basically enabling the Glazers to stay. So there are 6 Glazers, we know, and 4 of them have, certainly 3 have had no kind of involvement on a day-to-day basis. What the other one, Brian, has kind of removed himself over the years from United. So it's just Avi and Joel, and I'm told that Joel and Avi are just very keen to find a way to keep the club and to run it themselves rather than run it with the voices of 4 siblings that maybe have different ideas. Now, if Avi and Joel think they can, get rid of their siblings and make a success of it, well and good, but they've had 18 years of trying, and it hasn't really looked very good, certainly the last 10 years, So I think the fans may have to brace themselves for the fact that the Glazers might stay. And I think one thing that struck me yesterday when Man City announced their plans to extend the Etihad to 60,000 seats, and had these artist impressions of what it looked like with this great, arena next to it and everything. It looked amazing. The City over the years, Abu Dhabi have invested so much at that stadium that it is now to the point where it's going to host games at Euro 2028, and Old Trafford isn't. Old Trafford is it's a relic of the past, and that's because the Glazers haven't spent any money on it. And it's similar with the team, where they have invested in the team, but a bit like Todd Bowley at Chelsea, they've made some bad decisions with coaches, with players, with contracts. So I don't think that they can, Joel and Avi can say, look, give us a chance because we know what we're doing. It's our siblings that didn't know what they were doing. I just think they had too long with it. But unfortunately, I just don't see a way that they will offload the club if they're getting offers of investment from American investment banks, because the idea of doubling the growth of the club over the years is just one of those things where, we've seen Super League come and go. We've seen the Premier League, the kind of operation, whatever it was. All these things, these big ideas, but at some point, one of these big ideas will come off because the big clubs with the big money are going to say, look, this needs to work for us. And one thing I've been told about is streaming, that eventually streaming rights will enable the likes of Man United and Liverpool to make an absolute killing on, overseas rights. So, and potentially, the FIFA Club World Cup is down the line as well. That might be more lucrative. So there are ways down the line where you can see Man United's growth and a lot of big clubs' growth, growing, doubling maybe, and that's what they want. But it's like chasing the rainbow, isn't it, with the Glazers? It's like, how long do they want? It's nearly 20 years now, and the debt is approaching £1 billion.
Yeah, saga rumbles on. Real Succession vibes off it as the Glazer siblings try and decide who's going to do what. Mark, great stuff as always. Thanks so many for joining us this morning.
Cheers, guys. Thank you. Brilliant.
Mark Ogden there, senior writer with ESPN at 8:24 approaching on this Wednesday morning's OTBAM. Delighted to have our own Cameron Hill in studio with us now, beside myself and Aisling. Morning, Cameron.
Well, Shane, Aisling, how you doing?
You've been on the Connacht beat, so Scott Fardy has landed a big role, but it's also a big role for Connacht. So, defence coach now with Connacht on a 2-year deal. An experienced individual to be thrown into that Connacht setup. This is a massively positive move, you'd imagine, for everyone in Connacht.
Oh, it's a huge appointment. I mean, Pete Wilkins, who is obviously going to be the head coach next year, is putting together a really strong ticket. So Cullum Tucker, who's the scrum coach at the moment, he's staying on. The scrum has been really, really good for Connacht this year. John Muldoon is coming back, obviously a legend at the sports ground, former Connacht captain, was at the helm when they won the Pro 12. But Scott Fardy, you feel, is different gravy again. An illustrious career World Cup finalist, in at Leinster for years, and as Pete Wilkins said yesterday, still very relatively new to the coaching game, but he mentioned the winning culture. I think that's what really stuck out, especially to Pete. Pete has mentioned it himself, that this winning culture is what they're trying to bring into Connacht. And I asked him yesterday if that's something that he felt was a problem at Connacht this year. Certainly it felt like in many, many games they've been able to build a lead and maybe not maintain it. They've kind of let teams come back in, and Wilkins was sort of saying, well, yeah, it's the consistency within performances, within games, that we're trying to improve, wrestling back momentum, keeping the standards up. He mentioned the Cardiff game at the weekend and said that the team worked defensively very hard. They worked very hard defensively, but not necessarily smart, and maybe that's what Scott Fardy is designed to bring in, that sort of clarity of focus and that winning mentality.
Closing out games, that was one of the big things I always felt with Connacht, that they'd get themselves in such a good position. You know, they'd be on to win by 5 or 6, and then coming to the last 5 minutes, it would just pull away from them, and it seemed like it was a consistent thing within their game. Yeah. I mean, the Zebre game from a few weeks back really sticks out in my mind, because Connacht seemed to be very much in control of that match, and then Zebre came back, and it looked like Zebre were going to have this famous comeback victory. Now Connacht pulled away again, but that has felt like a problem this year. It really, really strong in one half and then not necessarily in the other. The game against Leinster sticks out as well, and there have been a few performances like that have been very disappointing from a Connacht standpoint, that when they're good they're great, but sometimes when the wheels start to wobble it completely comes off the track.
There's also the point made by Scott Fardy yesterday in his quotes. He's talking about the experience in the Connacht squad, but also the youth. There seems to be a nice blend heading into next season. I know it's maybe a cliche to say it, but Connacht certainly have that balance of players with a little bit of experience, and also players who have no fear because they're so young.
Yeah, and the raft of contract extensions that have come out over the last while is great news for Connacht. There are a few players departing. Adam Byrne of Leinster, of course, he's leaving at the end of the season. Didn't really quite work out for him at Connacht. Connor Fitzgerald, I should say, he was brilliant, and he will be a bit of a loss to Connacht, I must say. Be interesting to see where he ends up. But the next person on the ticket who I'm really looking forward to seeing who Wilkins can bring in is a backs coach, whether he's going to stick with the current regime or bring someone in, because I still think Santi Cordero coming to Connacht is huge. The Argentina international, he is going to bring some amount of flair to this team, and if he's managed right and they can bring together Mack and John Porch and Tiernan O'Halloran, they could have a really, really potent back three next year, and that is really exciting from a Connacht perspective. So as you say, there's a lot of youth coming through, but it's the players that are there that are staying on and that feel like there's going to be something built next year. That's the stuff that will really light a fire under my Connacht art. Is that the phrase?
Well, if it's not a phrase, you've just invented a new one, so I love it.
Trademark that, Cameron.
The Friday fire pit on your brain on Wednesday. I love it.
Yeah.
Stay
Adrian's
close.
here, that's the problem.
Exactly, yeah, you're confused. You think it's the weekend. Cameron, great stuff. Thanks for popping in. That's the news that Connacht have appointed former Leinster and Australia forward Scott Fardy as new defence coach on a 2-year deal at 8:28 a.m. on Wednesday morning's OTBAM. Time to turn our attention to Gaelic football, and delighted to have the former Mayo star David Brady on the line with us this morning. Morning, David.
Dan, how's things? How are you keeping?
Keeping well. There's a few.
How are you, David? How are you?
A few areas.
Good, thanks.
We want to talk a different number of things with you, David. But of course, I did want to start with the story of the weekend in Monaghan. I'm gonna get criticised here. Why is Shane still talking about Monaghan? It's Wednesday, but I don't care. What a game! What a game, David.
You have every right to be still talking about it. I've been still thinking about it. At one stage, I think my wife turned around and said, "Are Mayo playing again this weekend?" Because I was kind of roaring and shouting, and it was an absolutely fantastic game of football. It had everything: And again, it had quality. Sometimes you see it was a great game of football, but they had no setup, they had no structure. It was the real, I think, the ignition of the 2023 championship, and well deserved and phenomenal display in the way that Monaghan came back. Like, they were dead and buried. You're not buried if you come back. So they were dead, and 5 points down at half time. And again, you kind of put yourself in the situation. 1-on-1, well, you're not really even 1-on-1. There was two backs converging, and you say, do I fist it over or do I just go for it? And it's natural, raw instinct sometimes, and that you just say low, hard, and what it produced was a dramatic winner for Monaghan. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
It's funny that some people are actually saying that he took the wrong option. I thought that is mad. Like,
the goal at the end.
Yeah. Like, he took the wrong option. He should have did this, played it safe and fisted it over the bar. David, for you as a manager, what do you make of that, of people making those comments? You
know what, they're going to be right at some stage, at some time, and that's the problem. You're going, I told you, remember that? You go, and people do say that players are nearly robotic now. There's so many phases. They're like robots rather than natural flair, and it was just that. And it comes down to this. It comes down to belief in yourself, but that just natural flair, whether it's out the back of your shed or the back house or the back field, or in Florence or in Oma, you're going my instinct says just do this. And that's I think that's what it was. It was just pure, like, this is a guy that was in his first championship game as well as such. You're going pure and utter natural instinct and flair, and I think it's absolutely brilliant to see. And there's loads of experts that would have said, fisted over percentages and this and that. They'll be right another day, but they were all wrong the last Sunday.
Sometimes it is a case as well of letting the shackles off, and Conor McManus kind of spoke after the match about that. He said, at half time they realised they had to approach it differently. They had to play on the front foot, attack the game, and just play with a little bit more freedom. And you could see that, like, Carl O'Connell's running game was brilliant. Stephen O'Hanlon was consistently taking players on, and beat Conor Myler for that lovely first Monaghan goal. There was just moments where the Monaghan players clearly decided, well, look, we're 5 points down, we might as well go for this.
And it is, sometimes, and a game is very, very scripted at times and very cagey. And you say O'Hanlon just went and said, that's it. And sometimes it takes one player to initiate that spark and saying, yeah, you know what, we kind of made inroads there. We walked through them to a degree, but it is that collective to saying it's do or die, and that's the spirit of a team, and we've seen that spirit in Monaghan down in Hastings McHale Park in the last league game, where they had to. It was backs to the wall. It's and yeah, they didn't know in the back of their mind there's another opportunity in the groups or whatever. You take it in championship as it's all or nothing, and they really did let themselves go, and it is refreshing. But they let themselves go, but they didn't lose their structure against they didn't leave themselves wide open. They worked hard. They worked collectively. Defensively, they remained solid, but they really improved in their attacking structure, and that was the direct hard running a lot down the channels against a Tyrone team that you're going, at half time, yeah, impressive. These guys, young Canavan, Derek Canavan, Rory Canavan, they were a formidable force, but they're only formidable when they're on the front foot.
We will get to the Galway Roscommon semi-final at the Hyde this weekend in just a bit, but that was something we wanted to touch on with you as well, David. I guess the 5-week gap for a team like Tyrone, and I don't think anybody is ruling Tyrone out of being potential Sam Maguire contenders at this stage, based off the weekend for sure. What should happen now? Because there's a lot of talk about the training camps and teams heading away for a little number of days in the sun. I don't know what Tyrone do now. Do players go back to club football? 5 weeks is a long time to be thinking with your thoughts, and Mayo are in the same boat.
A long time, yeah. And again, it's kind of, now that everyone is kind of back to work, the Easter break is kind of when a lot of teams pencil in a training camp. The Kerry team were in La Manga last week over, and had by all accounts a very productive training camp. I got a few pictures back And it's that for me, and like Galway they flew out at 4:00 in the morning after the National League final defeat. They were over in Portugal, it was. So again, you probably might have your own training camp. You might go internally in Ireland now. Guys definitely need a break, because it's been hard and heavy and consistent since December, November, December, January, straight into the National League. They need to recharge. A few of the male players went away and got a bit of sun from themselves, that they had that opportunity. Everyone took the 10 days off or whatever. But from a training camp, I think, and my personal experience, they're brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. But that sense of dedicated time, it was like, this is us being professional to the highest degree you could possibly achieve by 7:00 session. You'd have a prep session. You'd be going on the pitch at 7:30 in the morning. You might finish at 9:30, have an ice bath, have a swim in the sea, then lounge, chill. Maybe you do some group sessions between forwards and backs or midfielders. You do some core rehab. You'd have some massage sessions. Then again, you'd have an active session at about 4 or 5 o'clock when the sun gets a little bit less hot, and you'd be going again. Then recovery, eating. You'll be eating 3.5, 4,000 calories a day nearly when you're in a training camp, because the amount of energy and calories you burn off. But it is the big thing is the collective togetherness and the bond, the fun, the crack. I remember being on a training camp, and nobody drank in any way, shape, or form. But at around 7:00, you could smell the aftershave passing the apartment. Some of the young fellas were happy to go out and have a few minerals and check out the scenery with the eau de cologne on them. But it was like all or nothing. You might have a good one night at the end of it when it was the shackles were let off, and that's important too from a team perspective.
What's a better place to be in? To be away on these training camps now, or to have meaningful matches, game time? Is that more important, or is it to have those 5 weeks as a collective?
Good question, but you're kind of going, and you're probably in. I think Galway would be in a very good place, because they had that opportunity to, as we call it, after defeat, to spit it out, get up and get on with it. They did that the next morning. That have talked, that have reviewed, and that have parked it, never to be focused on again. And again, they had a full week's training. Kerry will have a good collective session together, and again, a lot of it is on the kind of the tactical part, or defensive, or kickouts, or certain plays. But there's nothing beats nothing beats winning, and that's what's important. And a lot of teams, your own team this weekend, Meath, they're playing awfully. If you can get a win under your belt, everything that's happened in the last 4 weeks or 4 months can nearly be put to bed. But you focus on the positives, and again, you look at Roscommon coming into this game, Connacht semi-final against Galway. They're buoyant, they're full of confidence, rightly so. And it's a weekend. What is there, 9 or 10 games? It'll be. I need to take one day off, because it is
jam-packed.
It is jam-packed, and it's great. It's great, and I love it, and it's great for GA people.
Yeah, so you mentioned jam-packed. Just to run people through the fixtures. So on Saturday we have the Connacht semi-final, the first one up, Sligo, New York, at Markievicz Park from 2:30. The two Munster Senior Football Championship semi-finals are also on Saturday evening, 4:00 at Fitzgerald Stadium, Kerry Tip, and then from 7 p.m. at the TUS Gaelic Round, it's Limerick against Clare, and you've Cavan Armagh in the Ulster quarter-final at Kingspan Breffni from 6:30 on Saturday. Then on Sunday, the big one we're going to talk about in just a second, Roscommon Galway at Dr. Hyde Park, 4:00 in the Connacht semi-final. You have the 4 Leinster Senior Football Championship quarter-finals, 2:00 Westmeath against Louth, the Park Talton. You have at 2:30 Kildare taking on Wicklow, that's at Netwatch Cullen Park. From 3:30 Laois against the Dubs, that is at Laois Hire O'Muir Park. And at 4 p.m, as David mentioned, Offaly Meath at Glenisk O'Connor Park. And in the Ulster quarter-final, the final one at Park Esler in Newry, Down taking on Donegal. That is at 2:00 on Sunday. But we do want to touch on Roscommon Galway, of course, David, with yourself. Really, really looking forward to this semi-final. Like, Roscommon no longer under any sort of radar, because I think that seems to be a phrase that's bandied about for Roscommon, but a brilliant league campaign, got their 6 points on the board early, and then of course that win over Mayo in Castlebar. Whereas Galway, coming off the back of that league final defeat, you wonder where they're at, but they have that strength and depth this year. So whose camp would you rather be in ahead of Sunday?
David Burke's, to be honest. That's, you're kind of going, in the mindset, in the momentum, and with their kind of positivity. It's all pointing towards Roscommon. And again, under the radar is for me, when they demolished Donegal in the last league game in Hyde Park. I think it was something like 13, 14 points to bet them by. That was an indicator that they were really up there. They finished third in the league, but the performance in Castlebar against Mayo National League champions was very rounded, and again very structured, but it had an air of they had a ferocity, they had a kind of, they brought a tenacity to the game that they need to bring to the game again against Galway. Probably they'll have to be restrained to a degree. It will be, conditions are promised to be warm and bright. So from a slick forward Galway forwards, it will be a challenge, but they're set up perfectly from a defensive point of view. And I do think it is going to be a really, really tight game. Galway, again, you have Comer coming back. Damien Comer, he hasn't had a lot of ball. He got a very nasty injury during the National League. Shane Walsh has played damn all. The reality is, if Galway had got their free taken, their 45s, their long range, to a percentage of 80% that they would have beaten Mayo, and that was probably where they let them down. Shane has done after the All Ireland club, went off travelling for himself, took a break, came back, integrated slowly, and the best of him is really going to start coming from this week onwards. He's had that training camp, he's had that opportunity to have a full week's focus, and I think he'll be at a different level come Sunday.
Another player that I'm really excited to see this season, David, is Matthew Tierney. Just what he can do, a young player, but I feel like it's this year or next year that he's really going to explode onto the scene, and we're really going to see this big player that he can be.
And he has every attribute, especially his hands and his pace, and it's that kind of, lightning quick on the ball, but also kind of a great heading for a young man. And again, you have that, like the Rob Finnerty's inside him. You have Comer, you have Walsh. Johnny Heaney was for me is always a fulcrum from a Galway perspective. Got a bad injury against Mayo, but he'll be back. He'll be back to his best. And you have the experience of Paul Conroy and go around the middle. And it is like these players. They're special players. And again, it comes from the kind of conveyor belt, and the conveyor belt from a Galway perspective was the under-20s, younger guys coming up, and now that conveyor belt is coming to fruition, and that's very important in accounting. You can see it again from a Sligo perspective. They have beaten Roscommon, they've beaten Mayo, and you can see the continuation and development, and that's what's coming to the fore in the Galway team as well, and under the management now of Pádraig Joyce, but previously under himself in underage, and that's vital. And if you can kind of bring that continuum of advancement and development and integration to senior football, it stands to a manager, but it stands to a team also.
We spoke about the kickouts, I think, the last day after the Roscommon Mayo match, and that certainly was another thing that cropped up at the weekend between Tyrone and Monaghan. To watch that battle between Niall Morgan and Rory Beggan, even just themselves defending kickouts as well as kicking them, it was quite fascinating to watch. And we know goalkeepers are changing. Conor McManus, I think, described Rory Beggan as a quarterback after the match, and we saw his ball in for that first Monaghan goal. Roscommon won 7 of their 9 first half kickouts against Mayo the last day, going long. Now, the conditions will obviously have dictated Roscommon's decision maybe to go long in some occasions. But how important is that midfield battle? Because you'd imagine Roscommon might try something different against Galway.
They might, but again, I can see the game becoming not very defensive. It's not. That's not being disrespectful or negative, but there is merits to keeping a game tight and keeping it defensive. And from a Roscommon point of view, yes, they went long on nearly every occasion because they had the confidence. If you know what you're doing before you're doing it, you're halfway there, no matter what the result is. And again, if you know you're going long, you know you're going to a certain area of the pitch. And again, it gives you that opportunity to have your defence set up. Tyrone have shown that as their number one modus operandi was to have a fixed defensive structure rather than have it, short and working it out from the back and being disjointed and maybe having gaps opened up if the ball is turned over. Begging Morgan the last day was just absolutely brilliant. The kickouts has changed the whole dynamic of Gaelic football. Whether it's you're 6 seconds on the tee, you have a ball left or right, so that can gain half a second to you. The ball is on the tee and it's gone again. Or the runs that guys make, or the pockets that they want to fill, the space they want to leave. If a team pushes up on a 45 or pushes up from a 25-yard free kick, we're going long, we're trying to go over the top, we're trying to create an overload, we're trying to create what you might call 3 or 4 pillars on the left-hand side. Galway are very good at from their long kickouts, creating a 3 or 4 man pod. And again, they have the strength, they have the physicality, but also they have the runners off. And that's, again, it's not to everyone's cup of tea, but it's becoming very much a tactical battle from a GA perspective on the kickouts. And again, the keepers coming up. And again, if you have 15 men in defence, you're going to have if the team you're playing against has 15 defending in the 45, how do you break them down? You're going to have to keep someone back because you just can't leave the house and the doors open. But again, the goalkeepers coming into these plays, they can create that overlap. They can create that, especially if a team is playing a +1, it means there's someone sitting back. So the goalkeepers can be that key that opens up the avenues and opens up opportunities for runners. And it's a 15-man game now, surely. And I think it's great to see that goalkeepers have. I said it to a man, I'd say about 14 years ago. I says, I don't know why goalkeepers, and he said, you're mad. But goalkeepers have always had a role to play. Maybe we kind of pigeonhole them, just stay in your line, do your job, and you'll be okay. But it has changed, and they're now a key part of teams.
Just on that, David, on how the game has evolved, it's constantly changing. There was comments during the week that football, to be an inter-county footballer nowadays, you don't need to be this skillful footballer anymore. You need to be more of an athlete. That would make it quicker onto a county team than a really skillful footballer. What do you make of comments like that?
You always need to have, some degree of skill. You always needed to have some degree of athleticism. Now, the athleticism we see in county football now is phenomenal. The composition is phenomenal. The way they're mechanically structured, physically, the metrics, and there is a lot of metrics in GAA now. Whether it's high velocity meters or high intensity meters, total distance. Actually, it comes down to one thing: what you're able to do with the ball in your hands. You'll get it for 7, 9, 12 times max nearly in a game. It's what you do with it. Yes, upstairs for thinking, but you have to have that natural raw ability. Just, and we've seen it, and it always comes to the top. Maybe in lesser counties, if you haven't got the quality, well then the quantity is get as many fit guys, get as many athletes as we can in. But you'll always see it come semi-finals and finals, whether it's the Shawnee O'Shea's or the Cliffords or the Shane Walsh or the Damien Comers or the Killian O'Connors or the Aidan O'Shea's. And you'll always have that natural raw ability that will always be there from top footballers. And Even, I'm here in Castleknock. You'd walk across the road and you'd see young 12-year-olds, and you kind of go, just have a look at these. And you can pick out the guys. You can pick out the guys that has natural raw ability, that looks comfortable on the ball, does something going, just that was nice. And that's always going to be there, and it should be always, I suppose, nourished and appreciated. And it's you need a mix of both, but natural will always win.
Yeah, really looking forward to this weekend's action. Home advantage for us common as well, although we've seen in Omagh and Castlebar in the last couple of weeks that home advantage doesn't always count for everything. In 2 words, David, which 2 counties are going to be contesting the Connacht final this year?
Sligo and the Rossies.
Oh, he's gone for it. Neck.
Hesitation.
Head firmly above the parapet.
I've got a lot of stick over the last 2 weeks. I deserve it. But no, the Rossies are probably going, oh no, we're doomed.
This is your mea culpa. Listen, David, appreciate your time as always. Thanks a million, David.
See you, Shane. See you.
Thanks, David.
Great stuff. 8:50 a.m. on this Wednesday morning's OTBAM. It is now time for John Duggan's Virtual Insanity.
You have entered Power Drive.
Oh, wow! John Duggan, good morning.
Shane and Ashton, how are we doing?
Keeping well, keeping
John?
well. What's taking your eye this week?
1 bullet in the chamber, in the revolver, 1 bullet in the gun, 1 player this week, and it's not on the PJ Tour, which is the team event, which is the New Orleans team event. I don't like that event. But I do think, say in the next 3 years, right, so there's 5 majors in the women's game in the LPGA Tour, you'd have to think Leona Maguire is going to win one of the next 15. Would you agree?
Surely.
Maybe one of the next 10.
It's coming. It has
It's coming.
to be.
This was the best player in the world as an amateur. She's had a meteoric rise through the rankings up to 15 in the world now. Look at that rookie performance in the Solheim Cup. Won on the PGA Tour for the first time last year, the LPGA Tour. Of all our tournaments last year, 33% of the time she was in the top 10.
Yeah.
She's had a couple of top 10s earlier this season, and she lines up in the first major of the year, which is the Chevron Championship, which has been played in Texas from tomorrow. It's at a course nobody's seen before, Jack Nicklaus designed course near Houston, but she's 50-1. And I think it might not be this week for her, but I do think if you're going to be loyal to Leona Maguire, I do think you're going to make a bit of money out of it. So 10 each way of virtual money at 50-1 for Leona, 1 bullet in the chamber. For Leona this week, and I do think that what I really like about Leona Maguire going forward in majors, folks, is that she's got such a smart head about her in terms of course management and discipline and improving her game, and I just think she's really equipped for the major scene, and we saw how well she played at the Women's British Open last year, was in the top 5, and I think whether it's this week or not, because the course is quite long and that might not suit her, I think she'll be definitely there in the major championship leaderboards this year, because I think she's got the mind for it. I think she's going to be winning majors soon. I think it's 50-1, not a bad bet this week, each way.
Yeah, the big thing about Leona, as you said, it's the mind management. Like at the Women's Irish Open last year, she had a bad day. The second day out, a really bad day, but she bounced back the third day and she got a top 10 finish that day when it didn't look likely whatsoever. So yeah, it is. It feels like it's coming. It feels like it's really building for her.
Could be a big weekend for Cavan. Cavan playing Armagh and Leona Maguire maybe winning as well. Could be a fun one for them.
Yeah.
By the time we blink, though, the whole provincial championship would be over. I'm just going through the amount of games around this weekend.
It's insane, isn't it? Compared to the 2 last weekend.
Well, how are you supposed to get a narrative or get a sense of story out of anything? That's what annoys me about the whole thing. So there will be stories, there'll be 3 to 5 to 10 stories this weekend, which we won't be able to get to breathe around. Like, there's nothing going on this morning in sport. There's nothing going on. There's like Chelsea last night, Drogba's comments. You've got Manchester City tonight. But there's nothing really in the mix of this story about the GPA. But whereas this weekend, you've so many Gaelic Games matches, and we won't be able to digest them by the time we get to the next round of matches. I think that's wrong. I think there's something wrong about that in terms of the calendar, the way these games are too thinly spread.
And it probably gives the games time to breathe. Like we're all talking about the Tyrone Monaghan match, A, because it was brilliant, but B, because probably it had that space to breathe.
There's only 2 games.
Yeah, there was nothing else to talk about, so it gave a focus to some brilliant football as well.
Like the Dubs are in action this weekend. We've got Leinster and Munster hurling. We've got Down against Donegal. We have Roscommon against Galway. These are all brilliant matches.
New York.
Yeah, there'll be things that'll
Story
happen, and there'll be things that we will just miss because of that. So, that kind of I just find it a bit frustrating. But that's today's rant out of the way.
Love it. Well, it should be a sponsored slot by this stage, John.
Yeah, well, I think when you get to a certain age, you get very grumpy, don't you? And all you do is become grumpy every single.
It's all
day.
ahead of us, Ash.
Well, no,
Yeah,
don't bring the youth.
Don't get into the time travel machine just yet.
We'll hold off. John, what else is happening?
Not much really. Look at Chelsea. Just you could expect last night that they were going to be picked off. I think the damage was done on the first leg. But November 1993 was the last time they lost 4 consecutive games in all competitions. That's 30 years ago, nearly 30 years ago. Manchester City got a clean bill of health. You can't imagine they're going to mess it up this time around. I think they'll be in that semi-final against Real Madrid. Manchester City, who go to Munich with a 3-0 advantage. And Haaland, I think, has been a huge part of that. He's got, 32 goals now in the Premier League, 47 goals in all competitions this season.
Yeah.
It's amazing, really. And, you'll have to think he might be the man. He might be the missing link to get Guardiola finally over the line for the Champions League final. I was reading yesterday that they're not sure if it'll actually be held in Istanbul because there's an election there and there could be a little bit of civil unrest rumoured. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. But there's not much happening in the middle of the week. And there's some brilliant writing today. There's Dara O'Shea and the Dubs, and there's Gordon Darcy on Leinster and all that kind of thing in the papers in the Irish Times, and really good writing. But a little bit of a lull in the week before we get into
You
the
don't
massive
feel the
weekend.
championship buzz, John?
I think I'll feel it when I watch the hurling. I think the big thing for me about the championship is jeopardy. And what I want to see is the jeopardy in the championship. Yeah. So I'm waiting for the jeopardy. I think we're going to get that quite quickly in the Leinster hurling and Munster hurling championships.
Yeah.
I think the format for the round robin is very, very good. I understand a day like, I know you're both at the game in Oma. There is a very much of the moment. It's brilliant for Monaghan to win, but then they've got to go and they've got to do another 2 times now. And then they're into a round robin. And, the football championship is long. And it's long, and it's long, and we're existing in it, I suppose, as opposed to living in it. Whereas I think the hurling championship will be living in the hurling championship quite soon. I think it's going to take up a lot of the oxygen in terms of the coverage of it, because you can't cover everything. And Leinster are playing in the Champions Cup semi-final on Saturday week, and we got the conclusion of the Premier League season. So I just worry, as a true Gael, which I am, and I'm a massive GA fan, that they'll be a little bit lost in terms of the narrative in certain things, because you can't have your attention on every single thing. Like Tipperary Waterford didn't get really any coverage there recently in the football, and it was a really good match. So that's my little bit of a worry about, even though the provincial championships are just almost there and existing, and if you took them out, you'd have time for teams to breathe, and you'd have time for them to plan for a round robin series, whether it's Dalton Cup or Sam Maguire Cup. I just feel at the moment you have this competition plunged into the middle here with not much on it, unless you're a county like Sligo. That be a really big deal if they won the Connacht Championship.
Oh, well, what if you didn't have an Ulster Championship?
Well, this is it, 100%. Saving football once again, John.
I don't know about that.
Not quite. Tongue in cheek there, obviously.
Yeah, but look, it's on the day, it's great for Monaghan on the day, and it says a lot about where Monaghan are at. I think it was an important win for Monaghan. It was a great finish. They were behind going into injury time, and it was really well taken. The goal was it Ryan O'Toole?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you can see on the day, but in the grand scheme of things, does it matter that much when you could see these counties facing each other again down in the round robin? Maybe not exactly Tyrone versus Monaghan, but 2 similar counties. Monaghan will have to play another 3 games in the round robin, whatever happens now in the rest of the Ulster Championship.
Yeah. 100%.
And if they win the Ulster Championship, they won't even have time to celebrate.
Yeah, you're straight into it. Yeah, it's all go. John, great to have us, folks. Thanks a million.
Thanks, John.
8:58 approaching on this Wednesday morning's OTBAM. Listening in there, the Glen senior football manager Malachy O'Rourke. Very good morning, Malachy. How are things?
Morning, Shane.
Are you excited for the championship? As excited as we are? John mentioned the word jeopardy there. It was a brilliant game between Tyrone and Monaghan last weekend. Maybe that jeopardy is lacking, but certainly the match itself was far from lacking.
Yeah, it was very exciting. I suppose it wasn't in keeping with the 2 previous games in the Ulster Championship, but it's sort of a game. I suppose it lost all structures. It went along as well in the second half and towards the end, and that made it more exciting. But there's no doubt from a Monaghan point of view, it was a brilliant day, and I suppose at half time it didn't look likely. It looked as if Tyrone were in control of the game a wee bit, and so no, second half now definitely there's obviously massive positives for Monaghan, and they got the result they wanted, and I suppose a lot of questions for Tyrone.
It followed that trend of a lot of those Monaghan-Tyrone matches that you would have overseen when you were Monaghan manager. Similar kind of back and forth. It's always going to be a point or two between the two teams either way at the end of it. Were you confident before the match that Monaghan could get the job done? Because it wasn't like they were being written off by any stretch of the imagination. But I guess that the vibe was, it's Tyrone in Omagh. They've had a good end to the league, and certainly they were favourites for most people heading into the match.
Yeah, that's right. And I suppose Tyrone, there seemed to be a good vibe and a feel-good factor about Tyrone, the way they ended the league. Monaghan, on the other hand, I suppose it's well documented that they're missing a couple of players. Obviously Niall Cairns and Ryan McInnesby are travelling this year, and then a number of fellas injured and one thing or another. So probably went into the game that Tyrone were the favourites, which probably wasn't a bad way for Monaghan to go into the game. Having said that, I suppose then at half time it looked a wee bit, even though there was a bit of a wind, it looked as if Tyrone were in control to some degree. But in fairness to Monaghan, they really turned it around at half time. They obviously were disappointed with the way they played in the first half and felt they hadn't got to the pitch of the game, and they hadn't displayed the energy that they wanted and so on. So second half was much better, and the game really turned on its head in the second half. And as I say, it left Monaghan obviously delighted with the way things gone, but Tyrone then would be asking themselves questions as to how they lost it as well.
We've mentioned many times this morning Ryan O'Toole and how he took that goal. Malachy, you as a manager, what did you make of his decision making? Should he have fisted it over the bar, or what do you think?
Yeah, it was a I suppose you could argue both ways, and probably Ryan and listen to a couple of his interviews after the game, it was just very much that he sort of is keen just to grab his chance to seize the moment, if you like, and probably a more experienced player would have been looking at the bigger picture and felt, look, I don't want to take a chance here, I'll just pop it over the bar and we'll go into extra time. Ryan just probably that his mindset was, look, it's an opportunity for me to take my chance. And I suppose the other thing was, unlike other times that chance would arise, you'd usually be under pressure. He actually had a lot of time, and there was nobody really putting him under pressure. He actually could have brought it a wee bit closer, but he took the shot. And I suppose all the time when you're talking to forwards in particular, when you get in a chance to get, you want to hit it low and hard, because obviously it's hard for the keeper to get down, and that's what he did, and obviously had a brilliant outcome.
I think Conor McManus took 9 shots in the match and all 9 went over, 8 of them albeit from frees, but it included that unbelievable point from play in the first half and the ridiculous free at the end out of the hands from the 45 metre line. There's a famous clip of Conor McManus in Hilly Park in Omagh a couple of years ago scoring that unbelievable point from the sideline, and I think the camera then pans to yourself, Malachy, and you're literally just no emotion. It was one of those things where I've seen this a million times already in training.
I'm used to this.
This is normal. So it's probably no surprise that Conor just keeps doing what he's doing.
No, and that's it. And I suppose he puts in the work. He's doing that for years and years, and behind the scenes, he puts so much effort into that. Into honing his craft, if you like. And the other big thing that I've said before is that no better man in that situation. He wants that opportunity. It's not as if he's hesitating or he wants to give it to somebody else. In those clutch moments, you don't want anyone else with the ball. Only Conor, and his kicking was top class, and even the score he got from play in the first half was excellent as well. But I think that's one of the areas that I suppose Tyrone will be annoyed about, that they had so much possession, and I thought in the first half when they were on top, I thought their execution at times wasn't great, and even the shot selection wasn't great at times. I thought they were kicking from angles that they could have worked it in closer to goals, and the first half I think they had something like maybe 16 shots at goal and converted 9 from play, whereas Monaghan maybe had about 3. So Monaghan were far more efficient, and I suppose that continued to a degree in the second half as well, even though Monaghan had more chances. But that'll be something that Tyrone will be disappointed about. It's something obviously that Vinny and the boys will have to look at as well, and that Tyrone did create an awful lot of chances in the first half. Monaghan weren't putting enough pressure on them at that stage. And then on the other hand, Tyrone will be disappointed with the amount of frees to give. As you say, Monty got 9 frees, I think it was. So as I say, both teams will there'll definitely be areas both teams will be looking at.
It was obviously a protracted process in hiring Vinnie Corey. It seemed to take quite some time in Monaghan, and a lot of counties, I think, are struggling to get managers on board at the moment. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of things to consider for them in their personal lives. But Vinnie Corey is someone you would have managed at county level. So is it any surprise to you whatsoever, given his leadership skills, that he has the job at this stage and that he's already got a championship win under his belt?
No, it's not really. Vinny always stood out as someone who commanded serious respect in the change room, and every time he spoke, everybody listened. Because they knew that he was talking sense, and that he took the emotion out of it. That he was a great leader. So from that point of view, it is no surprise. I suppose I would think Vinny would feel the same thing. He probably was a wee bit surprised that it happened so quick. First of all, probably when Banty took the job, a few years ago, probably Vinny wasn't really expecting to be involved in that. And then when he was, I think after that ended, it probably wasn't on his immediate radar anyway to take over the job. But I think the more it went on, and he saw that there was nobody really coming in to take the job. I think it was more a case that Vinny felt that he didn't want to be sitting and watching things unfold or anything else, and he just felt that even though maybe in a perfect world he would have waited a few years, he just felt the time was right. And as well as that, I think people from the outside maybe had got the wrong opinion. Maybe would have felt that the Monaghan team was coming to the end. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I know that there are obviously Connor and Darren Hughes, Carl O'Connell, a few of those boys are coming obviously the end of their careers. But there's an awful lot of good young players. There's a lot of fellas sort of the mid-age range as well. So there's a lot of quality players there, and they've over the years they've been used to a good setup and a good environment where they really want to achieve things, so it's a healthy environment there. And Vinny knew that from being involved in the last few years as well, that there was a lot of good players there, and I suppose that's ultimately then why he stepped in.
You're probably the perfect man to ask about the Monaghan Derry match, given you're a lot of the players on both sides. How do you see that one going? It's a big task for Rory Gallagher, but it's one of those games. We saw Monaghan and Derry last year in that game in the Athletic Grounds in Armagh. Cracking game. Derry get over the line by a few points, 3 or 4 points I think it was in the end. How do you think this one's going to go?
Yeah, I suppose it won't be as open, I wouldn't think, as the Tyrone Monaghan game. That game sort of lost its shape towards the end in particular. So I think Derry will be a lot more structured. They will make it a lot more difficult for the Monaghan forwards to operate in. And then Derry as well, they're playing very well. Their teamwork in the forward line is very good. They're able to create scores, a lot of team scores rather than individual scores. So look at obviously Derry will go into the game as favourites, and they've pushed on from last year. Monaghan, on the other hand, I suppose have lost a couple of the players that they had last year. Having said that, the boost Monaghan got from beating Tyrone will be massive to them. So it's set up really well, and it is a very hard one to call. If there's no doubt that Monaghan will have to be stronger defensively. Even last year they conceded 3 goals to Derry. No, look, you'd have to say Derry are the favourites on form at the minute, but I think it's going to be a great semi-final.
It might come down to injuries as well, like Chrissy McKay, a little bit unsure about him. He came off. Conor Glass as well. Malachy, obviously, Conor well. Has he really got the time off? That's sort of what I look at Conor now, like the massive performances that he was always putting in. We haven't seen him reach those heights in recent games, and I often look and go, did he have any time to relax, to chill out, to recuperate from such a long season?
Yeah, well, I suppose Rory wanted them back in fairly quickly, and look, he had his reasons for doing that. Obviously, so that's his decision. But no, just to your point, Alison, about the injuries. I did, like in the match against Dublin in the league final, it was noticeable, obviously, that when Conor went off, Dublin got a couple of the goals anyway. On Saturday as well against Fermanagh, when he went off, that was the time that Fermanagh got the goals. Chrissy McKeag didn't play against Dublin, and then I did notice on against Fermanagh as well, on the 2 goals that Fermanagh got, Chrissy was actually doing a man marking job on Ulton Kelm and was actually had followed him out the field, so he wasn't in the area where the ball came in and where the goal was scored. So I think the 2 boys are vital to their defensive effort, and Conor, I think, is it's sort of, sometimes a lot of his work goes unnoticed as well, and that it's not sort of that flamboyant stuff around the middle of the field and going forward at times, although he is very good at that as well. It's just a very unselfish role he plays for the team. He gets back and fills that space in front of the goals. He's very good at reading it. He just doesn't stand there. He's quick to come out. He's quick to double up on players. Obviously, he's good on the high ball, and he's good at just getting his hand in. So he is, he's a key player for them. And so obviously, and that's the thing, I suppose, with the way the season is, and I suppose it's the problem, in some ways with all the Ulster teams. The Ulster Championship is so competitive. To win the Ulster Championship, you have to play 2 or 3 high-octane games, and that only gets you then to the group stages like everybody else. You then have to play 3 games in that. You might have to play another game to get you through to a quarter final, which I think is the first weekend in July. So you have a serious amount of games to play to get that far. And as you say, we're already talking about teams picking up injuries. So what's it going to be like, 6-8 weeks down the line? And I think that is one thing that's going to have a major impact on the championship this year. And it'll just be a case of which team judges it best, and nobody really knows the answer at this stage. But the teams that arrive at a quarter-final weekend freshest with all their main players on board are obviously going to have an advantage, as long as they haven't undercooked and as long as they have enough hard games behind them. So it's at this stage, it's very hard to know what's the best route, and I suppose only time will tell.
I don't think we've been chatting to you, Malachy, since the All-Ireland Club final and the madness that ensued, the 16 men of Kilmacud Crokes. And I know your reaction immediately after the match was disappointment, I guess, first of all, based on the result, but then over the following days and even weeks, just the story grew legs and seemed to drag on forever. How do you feel about the whole thing now?
Yeah, it was disappointing the way it ended up, but I suppose you just at this stage we've got over it, we've parted, and we've just moved on, and I suppose it doesn't serve much purpose keeping on talking about it on else. But I suppose just at the time, we were disappointed with the way it ended up, and I suppose immediately after the game, if the GAA would have come in or Kilmacud would have said, we realised that it wasn't the way the game was supposed to finish, and offered a replay, I suppose you would have had to think about it seriously then, and possibly go for it. But once it dragged on and that wasn't the case, it was never going to be, we were going to get nothing from it at that stage, and to play the game at a later date when there was no appetite for it, it wasn't going to serve anybody any good. So we just, I think the club made the right decision and just said, no, look, we'll leave it and move on.
Yeah, there was a lot of drama around it, but I often thought it must have been so difficult for you as manager, for the players, for the supporters, for the club and Kilmacud as well. I just thought for the players and everybody involved in it, it must have been quite a difficult time.
Yeah, it was in a way, although I suppose there was a lot of noise going on outside, and it's like anything in the club, but it's like preparing for games or anything else. You just have to sort of divorce yourself from that and stay in your own bubble. And I think the club were very strong, and that straight away the club came out and said, look, we'll take our lead from the players and management. We'll back you 100%, and that's what the club did. And the club was really, really strong, and they said, look, whatever you decide, we're prepared to back you. And the club were very united on it, and right from the word would go, we said, look, whatever's the best thing for the club, it doesn't matter really what anybody else says or what anybody else's viewpoint is on it. That's really, it's immaterial to us. It was a case of whatever's the best thing for the club going forward, and that's what we based every decision on, and that's I suppose in the end up that's why we took the decision we did.
Well, I think the GA, a bit of grudge matches, never goes too far. It always helps the interest. So maybe next year we can get a rematch, Kilmacud Glen, and there'll be a bit of build up to that one, no doubt. Malachy, brilliant stuff as always. Thanks a million for your time.
Not at all. Thanks, Shane. See you, Aisling.
Thanks, Malachy.
9:14 a.m. approaching on Wednesday morning's OTB AM. Here are some highlights on the OTB Podcast Network for you across today. We'll have, of course, last night's news round, Rugby Daily, and the football show as well with Dan McDonnell. You can follow OTB across social and subscribe to the OTB Podcast Network. After these ads, the counter-pressed podcast Jessy Parker-Humphreys and our own Kathleen McNamee will join us to discuss tonight's WSL action, where first takes on third as Manchester United play Arsenal. Now though, Tommy, Paddy Andrews and James O'Donoghue are bringing the football pod to Killarney for a live roadshow. That's on Thursday, May the 4th in the Great Southern Hotel. This is your warning to get your tickets now, because there really aren't many left. Go to www.offtheball.com/events or search for the Football Pod Live Killarney. It's all in partnership with AIB. Check out the hashtag #TheToughest for more. And to whet the appetite, you'll hear a clip from the latest episode of the Football Pod in this ad break. Back in a sec.
You're listening
to OTB AM. Off the Ball will be hosting a live UEFA Champions League roadshow in partnership with Just Eat, and it's coming your way on May 3rd, live from the Mansion House in Dublin.
We'll be joined by some great guests, including UEFA Champions League winner John O'Shea. Our guests will share memorable stories and reminisce about their careers.
We'll also look ahead to the latter stages of the competition.
This is an exclusive off-air event and tickets are limited, so don't delay. Go to offtheball.com/events and we'll see you on the night.
Just Eat, the official food delivery partner of the UEFA Champions League.
Paddy, what is the biggest lie you've ever told in a pre-match interview as a Dublin footballer?
I can't answer that question on air. Jesus Christ. That's an off-air comment or post-Killarney live show. I can't be delving into that stuff here. We were always very respectful in our media duties before and after matches.
Were you briefed?
I can neither confirm nor deny if we were briefed. If you look back through that period,
did some bad interviews.
It will be pretty obvious we were briefed. Yes, we were.
James, were you allowed out to speak your mind before a match?
They shut you down after your Facebook hack. You were never allowed to do a meeting. It's Morris had to put you in chains.
We didn't do much. I got in trouble one time. I said Gooch was coming back from injury or something like that. And the interviewer said, are you looking forward to playing with Gooch? Do you think you could interchange between number 11 and number 15? Or something like that, or between the full forward and centre forward.
And he's teeing you up, Jimmy.
I was like, yeah, love playing with Gooch, whatever. If we can rotate, gave some spiel just off the cuff. Obviously, I'd never thought about that or anything. Front or back page, they probably hung me out to dry. It was like, James O'Donoghue says that he's going to be centre forward and Gooch is going to be corner forward. It just made me look like an absolute.
Don't be blaming the media. You are the media now. You are the media. You're a snake.
But you can be caught. You have to be careful. Definitely have to be careful.
It depends.
Because you get burned a couple of times and then you realise that you're better off being a dub and just saying, yeah, they're a good team.
And they were good teams.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
9:17 a.m. on this Wednesday morning's OTB AM, and we're going to turn our attention to the WSL. Loads of action to look forward to, and Champions League action as well this week. Jessy Parker-Humphreys from the Counter Press podcast joins us on the show this morning. Morning, Jessy. How are things? I think we're on mute there, but we'll pick you up in just a second. You might be on mute, it might be on our end. We'll figure it out. We have Kathleen McNamee in studio with us as well. Morning, Kathleen.
Morning, guys.
How are things?
Yeah, good. You said we're looking forward to the WSL and Champions League this week. I don't know. Am I looking forward to? Very nervous. Well, United tonight for Arsenal and then Wolfsburg at the weekend. It's not exactly an easy run of games.
We do have Jessy Parker-Humphreys, I think, back to discuss that game and plenty else happening this week. Jessy, sorry we lost you there just for a second, but looking forward to this one tonight. Manchester United hosting Arsenal, first against third. It's going to be a cracker.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really, really exciting game. It'd be very intriguing to see how both teams deal with the pressure of this one. You know, two teams I think who've not been in this position of having the opportunity to win the WSL in quite some time. Obviously, United never really being in that position. They're coming off the back of reaching their first ever FA Cup final from the weekend, and then Arsenal kind of have that. Is it a distraction? Is it a motivation of the Wolfsburg game at the weekend?
United weren't all that impressive in the win over Brighton at the weekend. There's certainly things for Mark Skinner and his coaching team to kind of pick up on. Sometimes that can be a good thing for a team. It can be the kick up the ass that you need to improve when you take on some of the bigger opposition like Arsenal. So surely they won't be as tetchy maybe as they were at the weekend.
Yeah, I think you could see maybe the intensity of what it would have meant for them to reach a first domestic cup final in the game against Brighton. But that being said, I think we've maybe started to see a slight decline in their performances and form, which is perhaps to be expected. Mark Skinner isn't a manager who particularly rotates his team very much. And I think, you know, as you get towards the end of the season, obviously your players start to get a bit more tired. Teams start to figure out how you're going to play if you're playing the same starting 11 every week. And I think that's something that we have seen in some of their recent games. But equally, like, there's no more motivation than obviously facing Arsenal at home.
You say about United and the fact that Skinner doesn't really rotate his team. He hasn't really had the bench, I suppose, for a lot of the year to rotate too much in terms of the players. But you also look at Arsenal going into this game and the sort of players that they're missing. Which team do you think going into tonight is probably suffering a little bit more from either Skinner's classic team that he likes to stick with, or the fact that Arsenal haven't really been able to have the team that they want for most of the season?
Yeah, Arsenal's injuries this season have been atrocious, and it's kind of amazing they're even in this position. But that being said, I actually feel like coming off the incredible sort of end of February, March that they had, winning the Continental Cup, coming from behind to knock Bayern out of the Champions League, the win against Man City, again coming from behind, it feels like regardless of the things that have gone against them in terms of injuries, that Jonas Eidevall has built this very impressive collective who I feel like are coming together in a way that we haven't seen. That feels like they're peaking at this point in the season, whereas I feel like Manchester United, they're almost on the other end of the trajectory, and it feels like there are the players there for Skinner to bring in if he wanted to. It's just almost like he doesn't quite trust them yet, which is fine, I guess, but maybe when you need to freshen stuff up, that's when you would like to be turning to your bench.
In terms of the players who he could bring in, who would be the sort of player that you would like to see him bring in?
Well, I guess Vilderberg Risa is a name who has been looked at a lot. Obviously, she kind of plays in the midfield area, which is quite fixed. You've got Katie Zellum, you've got Ella Toone. She was brought in to play in that more central role, with Ella Toone playing on the right wing against Brighton in the WSL, which I'm not really sure was a solution. Equally, Lucia Garcia is a player who I think has looked amazing every time she's played, but she's kind of been rotated in and out with Nikita Paris. Hasn't really had an opportunity there to nail down her spot. So they're just a couple of players who I think it'd be interesting to see if they were used more, but definitely it feels like Skinner knows who he wants to play and how he wants them to play. And as I say, I don't think that has to be a problem. It's just when you're looking at whether teams have kind of... I think we saw this against Brighton in the semi-final. You know, Ona Battier is obviously a fantastic player. I'm not saying like she shouldn't start, but I think you could see how Brighton were like, right, we're just going to do a man-marking job on her and really try and limit the opportunity she gets going forward. Beatrice Sari doing a fantastic job for large portions of the game there. They're the issues that I think arise when you're using the same 11 again and again.
Jessy, the fixture scheduling has been something that's cropped up in press conferences across the season, and Jonas Eidevall is quite keen to stress it this week especially. So we mentioned Arsenal, of course, in action tonight, but then they have the trip to Wolfsburg away on Saturday in that Champions League semi-final first leg. Whereas Chelsea, they play last Sunday and they have that gap until this weekend when they are at home against Barcelona at Stamford Bridge. Does he have a point? Eidevall makes saying it's very odd. He finds it very odd that the scheduling sees Arsenal and Chelsea with very different weeks.
I mean, but equally you could say Chelsea play on Saturday in their first leg and Thursday in their second, whereas Arsenal play on Sunday and then the bank holiday Monday. So look, I think across the course of the season, teams are going to have moments where they feel like they've got very quick turnarounds. between games. They're going to have moments where they look at the opposition and think, it's unfair that they've got more or less prep. Man United could say they're frustrated because Arsenal weren't in the FA Cup semi-final, so they had a whole week to prepare coming off the back of the international break, whereas Manchester United had to prepare for the Brighton game and then this one. Look, over the season, I think generally these things work out, and ultimately it's kind of a privilege if you're Arsenal that you've got these extra games in the calendar because you've reached this point, and I think really you've got to rise to that occasion, even if it means things get tougher in the league because you've got these extra games scheduled in.
You mentioned the Arsenal injuries. Chelsea haven't been fully lucky themselves. Millie Bright being one of those ahead of the Barcelona game that you're looking at, thinking what might have been, but they'll be looking to banish demons against Barcelona. It's probably one of these mouth-watering ties that we wanted to see, but Chelsea fans, I'm sure, will have nightmares thinking about Barcelona.
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, the loss in the Champions League final in 2021, 4 goals conceded in the first half, is one of the more brutal performances that I've ever had to sit through a team deal with. And Chelsea, they've not had it easy at all. Obviously, knocking out Lyon, the holders of the Champions League, to get to this point, only to have to face the previous holders in Barcelona, who obviously reached the final last year as well. It's going to be very, very tough for them. No Millie Bright, probably no Khadijah Buchanan either. So I think we're definitely going to be looking at a makeshift centre-back pairing. Equally, there's been a lot of injuries in attack. Pernilla Harder potentially back. We saw her on the bench in the game against Villa in the FA Cup at the weekend, but still no Fran Kirby and kind of no update on whether we might even see her this season. So Chelsea, it's been tough. I think they've struggled with injuries almost as much as Arsenal have, to be honest. But sometimes I think Emma Hayes gets the most out of her team when their backs are against the wall. It's going to be tough, I think, to beat Barcelona over the 2 legs. Maybe if it was a one-off game, you might give Chelsea a chance. But to have to go to the Camp Nou for the second leg, it will be some experience, but I don't know if it will be a good one.
Jessy, can you tell me, like you say, it's going to be difficult, and I totally agree in terms of doing it over the 2 legs against Barcelona, but they probably would have said the same thing against Lyon. And I mean, that second match, like, what was going through your head watching it? I was watching it from behind my fingers. It was so intense. And I've never had so many messages about women's soccer before, ever. I was like, all my friends who don't even normally watch it were just like, this is so intense.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be one of the more amazing games that I've ever been to. I was at Stamford Bridge, and I, had fully just accepted that Chelsea were down and out, and it was all over, because it felt like Chelsea's whole game plan was just to defend the 1-0 lead from the first leg. As soon as Lyon scored, it felt like the writing was on the wall. I never saw Chelsea, coming and getting a goal in open play, and Emma Hayes basically said as much after the match. But then obviously the penalty decision, the fact that it became the last kick of the game and everyone was being sent away, you had no real sense in the ground of what was going on. I don't know if that was different if you were watching from home, but I think there was just general confusion. Obviously, the ice cold mentality from Maren Mjelde to step up and score and send it to penalties. But obviously It's hard when you look at these things. On the one hand, I feel like, have Chelsea used up all their miracle moments from the Champions League in that game, or do you start to think, there's something weird going on, there's something a bit special going on here? I think the difference is that the Lyon team Chelsea are facing are a Lyon team who've also struggled with injuries this season, who I don't think have played anywhere near their peak, nowhere near their level, whereas Barcelona, despite obviously missing Alexia Putellas for most of the season, we've really seen them, I think, wind themselves up and get into really good form. Maybe at the start of the year we saw them be a bit shaky. They did lose to Bayern Munich in the group stage, but their recent performances have just been back to peak Barcelona. Aitana Bonmati has more than stepped into Alexia's shoes in her absence, and they're just such a relentless team. To have to face them over 180 minutes I honestly don't know if there's any team in Europe right now who could come out on top there. But hey, that's why we watch football, because sometimes the things you think are going to happen, they just don't.
Yeah, you can never write Chelsea off. And just to mention Sam Kerr as well, she's really on form at the minute. We feel that she's probably been the main driving force for Chelsea.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's been an interesting season for Kerr. She's not scored as many goals as we've seen her do in past seasons for Chelsea, but I think the goals she has scored have been incredibly important. You think back to the equaliser at the Emirates against Arsenal in January, the goal against United as well in March. And I feel like it will be very interesting to see how Barcelona try and deal with her, because they're a team that like to push their centre-backs forward, and Kerr's a player who thrives when she has that space to run into. Games on two big pitches as well, Stamford Bridge and Camp Nou, obviously. So I feel like Chelsea will think, if they're going to have their opportunity, it will come through Kerr. She's not always a player who, even though she's an incredible goal scorer, is someone who you absolutely rely on to score the chances she takes. And it's a very strange thing. She can score this absolute worldie, and then sometimes she'll miss something that you feel like it should be an easy one. She had a one-on-one against Hannah Hampton in the Villa game at the weekend and missed. So Chelsea, I think, will be hoping that she's on peak form. But obviously, in the international break, she got a rest in that Australia game against Scotland. Then she was just absolutely immense in England against England, inflicting their first defeat, obviously under Wiegman. So feels like she's in a good place right now.
What's the blueprint for stopping Sam Kerr, Jessy? Because as Republic of Ireland fans, we're looking towards that opening World Cup game, Australia against ourselves on the 20th of July, and really nervous sweats trying to think about how that Irish defence can stop her.
Yeah, I think I could make a lot of money if I had a good blueprint on how to stop Sam Kerr. I think her movement's just absolutely incredible, and that's somehow defenders have to try and deal with that. I've spoken to defenders before who say that you just think you've got a ball coming in, and it's just like her movement and the way she jumps in the air, suddenly she's beyond you and she's gone. I think the key is probably dealing with the players who are going to play those balls in behind. When you're looking at Chelsea team, it's how do you deal with Guro Reiten so she's not in a position to put that cross into the box, to play that ball over the top to Kerr. And that's ultimately the key. She's such a ruthless striker that in some ways I think you've got to cut her off at the source rather than worry too much about what she's actually doing.
What did you make of this whole debacle over the FA Cup final tickets, Jessy? Because it's a bit of a strange one. So we've had 65,000 tickets issued, 50,000 are neutral that have sold out, and the clubs are only getting a handful of 8,000 each. Now, when you compare that to the men's FA Cup final, each club gets around 30,500 tickets for the two clubs that are involved. Seems like a strange split of the stadium.
It does, and I think it does when you compare it specifically to the men's FA Cup final, but I think it's really important to remember that the women's game is still growing, and we're looking at having a sold-out Wembley for an FA Cup final for the first time ever. When you're looking at the Chelsea City FA Cup final from last season, I think we saw 50,000 tickets sold. So there's been a massive increase and interest. Obviously, I'm sure the fact that United having Ella Toone, Mary Earps, Alessia Russo only adds to that interest, given how popular the Lionesses have become within England. And I think it's also important to bear in mind that when we're talking about men's teams, these are the clubs that sell out 30, 40, 50,000 seater stadiums themselves every week, whereas Chelsea's allocation is double what they could fit in Kings Meadow, and they only sell out Kings Meadow a handful of times a season. So I think when you take it in that context, it feels like quite a lot of tickets for each team. I think the thing that would have been maybe interesting, which I saw someone suggest, which is that to maybe give a bigger allocation but have a deadline, so that if those tickets through clubs aren't being sold, there is the opportunity for neutrals to go. Women's football does have a different fan culture, and I think that's something that should be celebrated. And having more neutral fans there, I think, can be seen as a good thing, providing that the fans of the clubs who are in the final can get their tickets and can be within their groups. But equally, I think it's something that's understandably a learning process, given how much the changing fandom, how much fandom has changed within England specifically as well since they won the Euros.
Considering the run-in of games that the top four teams at the moment have, Jessy, who do you think is first going to win the entire thing, and who is going to get those Champions League places for next season?
No pressure.
And I will be replaying this when it comes to the last weekend in May.
Clip this one up. I do think it's hard to look past Chelsea in terms of winning it. I feel like they've got probably the easiest run in terms of the games are in their hands, and realistically the biggest challenge will be Arsenal, but it is a home game. The only thing that I think will be interesting is how much these Barcelona games might affect them. They would be looking to win the league for the fourth time in a row. It's understandable that Emma Hayes probably cares a lot more about the potential of winning the Champions League than she does winning another WSL title. But equally, I think if they go out of the Champions League, they will say, well, we'd like to take a domestic double in the FA Cup final and the WSL still. The Champions League spots, I really have no idea. And I think tonight could give us a big clue. I think if either Arsenal or United was to lose, you would suddenly think, or maybe it could be one of those teams to drop out, because again, it just becomes that impetus thing. And I think part of the reason I think Chelsea are favourites is because they've been there and done that before, in terms of just like pushing on. Like, you see them put 8-9 wins in a row to win leagues in the past seasons. For all three of City, Arsenal and United, it's going to come down to, I think, like, who doesn't let it get to their heads. I think Arsenal probably have a good shot of getting Champions League, and equally if they win tonight, I think they'll feel like, obviously, if they beat Chelsea, they could win the league too. So I do wonder if it'll be one of the Manchester teams to miss out, but I'm going to fully sit on the fence here and say I've got no clue at this point which one it will be.
Smart answer.
That's fair. Jessy, I'm really sorry to bring it up. I really, really am. But as a Chelsea fan last night, how do you feel about the start of the Frank Lampard tenure? Part 2?
It's been a weird couple of weeks, and I think last night kind of summed up Chelsea's whole season in that there were some real positives in the performance, great energy, good chances in front of goal, can't score any of them, end up losing, obviously. The Frank Lampard appointment's weird. I don't think it's had the effect that the ownership thought it might have. I mean, I guess Chelsea sort of looked better potentially against Real Madrid, but equally Graham Potter's probably his best managerial performance came against Dortmund in the second leg of the round of 16 game. So, and now you just look at the rest of the season and you're like, okay, Lampard's not going to be there beyond the end of the season. What's his role with this team? Like, what is the aims? The league's. I mean, what is the league? It's like, we can finish 10th or 12th. Great. I don't know how Lampard motivates such a big squad. I guess, the development of some of the younger players will be his focus. But yeah, just pretty frustrating to be sitting in the middle of April and feel like the season's very, very much gone.
Yeah, we'll wait and watch with bated breath to see what Lampard can do with this Chelsea team between now and the end of the season, regardless. Jessy, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
That's Jessy Parker-Humphreys from the Counter Press podcast, 9:35 a.m. on Wednesday mornings, OTBAM. Kathleen, thank you very much for everything this morning.
Having me, guys.
And Aisling, thanks a million.
Thanks,
for
Shane.
everything this morning across the morning. OTBAM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now. On tomorrow's show, tomorrow Thursday, Johnny Ward will join myself in studio. We'll have Shane Curran giving the Roscommon angle ahead of this big Connacht semi-final this weekend. Michael Meehan will join us as well to give us the Galway angle. Vinny Perth will do his usual semi-regular slot talking League of Ireland. Taggy Fogarty previews the action of the weekend's hurling. We'll have Declan Inches. You had to be there, plus plenty more besides as well. Right now though, a slight tangent. Have a wonderful Wednesday.
Welcome, a slight tangent is coming at you. The crew have assembled. Will O'Callaghan is to my right. Hello, Will.
Evening, lads.
We have Michael McCarthy to my left. Hello, Michael.
Hello again.
Arthur O'D also in the house. Hello.
Hi, Joe. In the house.
What is a slight tangent, I hear you ask? It's where the OTB FMPM team get together and chew the fat, I suppose. Emails aplenty coming into a slight tangent at offtheball.com. Do get involved. Or whatever issue is catching our eye. So that is the plan. We have lots to get through, so I'll proceed. Our first email concerns Arthur O'D.
In the subject.
Yeah.
Great.
Surefire way to get us to stop and read that one. Hi, Joe and crew. I'm back again. This is John from Leitrim in Galway, who is self-confessed whinger in the past.
He is?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Remember? He was whinging about...
lack of Connacht coverage.
Yes.
Yes, but that's not what he emailed us about. He emailed us about asking us, do we know more than we let on sometimes about certain stories?
Real crank. Certain stories, do you know more than you can say? What's that like? We had a good discussion.
I don't know what's going on.
Well, it's ironic. It's a good discussion he prompted us to have last week. But anyway, I'm back again. Thanks for reading out my email last week. It was useful to hear my words read out loud. It exposes how overly verbose my writing can be. Again, I just think, John, you could have just gone with verbose. It's not for me to say.
Yeah, you're either verbose or not. You're not overly.
Mr. O'D Mr. O'D left me under no illusions on this score. I saw the man yawn his head off on the bottom right of my screen as Joe entered my second paragraph. I'm a theatre maker by trade, and I've received my fair share of bad reviews over the years, but none have quite matched Arthur's in its brutal, ferocious pithiness. Mr. O'D, stay in the sports world. We couldn't survive such flame-throwing in the arts. Regards, John from Leitrim in Galway.
That was a well-written email.
Very well. Didn't yawn during that one?
No, I don't know what to say.
I want to send Arthur to the Galway Arts Festival this summer and have him sit during one of his plays.
Yeah. I would read your theatre reviews.
Oh, I'd say Arthur would be a very interesting theatre reviewer.
Akin to Fintan O'Toole, you could be dab hand at your
I wouldn't like this. I have no interest, to be honest with you, in saying anything negative about people's work. It's too personal.
What about John?
You just assumed that John's play is going to be negative. It might be good.
No, but I've not seen John. Like I don't know. I don't know John.
Your sense is John's not good though.
Like you've seen his writing.
Well, I've heard it.
Overly verbose.
But that's all strikes me as really harsh. Wouldn't like to live like that.
Do you enjoy a negative review?
Not so much. Unless it's something I really dislike.
Honestly, I love it.
And I'll enjoy it.
I rub my hands and tuck into this.
Well, it's like that thing, isn't it? It's like when you hear, when a team you dislike loses and you really start lapping up all the podcasts. It's like after England lose the Euros final or something.
Yeah, that's
I'm listening to podcasts I'd never listen to. It's just, I got to hear what they're going to say about it.
You're not afraid to be negative about sport though?
No, but that's impersonal. It's like you're not going to be, so it's something someone creates. It's a lot more personal. It's a lot more, you'd really want to be pretty on some pretty sure footing before doing something like that, because it's not, there's no, like, you only think from your own perspective, like if you hear something like that, it'll be terrible. It'll really stick with you.
It's an interesting idea. Do you lap up those negative reviews, say?
No.
But I'd imagine a lot of people do. I'd say when somebody, I'd say the first few times a reviewer does it, there's an element of like having the balls to tell it like it is, and they get a lot of good reaction for that. And you wonder then, does that slip into, this is my motif now, and this is how I get whatever the equivalent of the clicks is, this is how I get the kudos, I suppose. I would, and then you're a little bit too mean.
Yes.
Over time, and it becomes sort of a...
It can depend who the target is. Like there was a deliciously vicious review of Gabor Mate, the trauma doctor, and his fireside chat with Prince Harry.
Oh, okay, I didn't see that.
You have a real growl for Prince Harry, don't you?
No, I'm really...
An interest in it?
Yeah, I have an interest. Yeah, I find it interesting. So I read that review and it was like laugh out loud funny at times. But then subsequently I saw Gabor Mate interviewed in the Irish Times this week.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how devastating that review was on his psychology for the subsequent weeks.
Yeah.
I had to go and see a therapist about it. And then I didn't feel as good. But,
Can you imagine that? Like it is there, yeah. Where was the review?
The Guardian, I think.
Okay.
But to be fair, it just tore the whole silliness of the architecture around Prince Harry to pieces. And it was a bit dismissive of Gabor Mate, I thought. And he said that's what he found most insulting, is that it was just, it took a media construct of him and tossed it aside, as opposed to showing a certain respect for him and his work.
He is highly respected. I don't know much. I've not read him now, but I know some people who have.
I can't shake this image now of Joe on the Malloy estate on a Sunday evening now with his coffee and every single pull-out magazine from the Sunday
Brandy,
papers,
surely.
working through it. Well, Brandy maybe that hour, yeah.
Cackling.
Slowly but surely cackling his way through each review.
No.
What have they got to say about the latest books in the Times this weekend?
No. But I take your point on, I wouldn't like to be the one dishing out the review.
Well, like, you're the most front-facing of anyone here. I mean, publicity-wise, of people who be seen.
Mm-hmm.
But do you ever get any... Like, have you ever seen... I suppose you'll presumably see the people who write negative things, like, say in the heat of Twitter, like, but, like, I imagine that must be the most brutal aspect of it.
Yeah.
Like, because it's just... You can't unsee it, like, no matter how frivolous it is, like, or whoever the person is, but I wouldn't want to do that, and especially from no point of authority. It's not...
Or even authority. I've had it both ways.
Yeah.
It's not pleasant. And if you're inclined to be anyway self-critical, which I think most of us are, myself included, even if you want to ignore the comment, there is a part of your brain going, they have a point though.
Yeah.
Could be right about that. So it can send you down a spiral. Not easy.
I'm not going to John's play for that reason.
Fair enough. Will we move on?
John's play.
Sport.
John, send me 2 tickets.
We'll move on. John, that's 2 emails in a row we've read out for you. As we're going to do for John in Cork very briefly, John in Cork wrote in last week bemoaning GAA as a spectacle. This was before Monaghan Tyrone. He has promptly sent a short email just to say, needless to say, John in Cork, my email to the show last week on Gaelic football as a spectacle has aged rather poorly. Laughing face. I take it all back.
It was a pretty good game on Sunday.
Yeah, but did it save Gaelic football?
Gaelic football
Does
needs
Gaelic
saving.
football need saving?
Oh.
Yeah, there we go.
15 matches this week is a better sample size. Like, I don't
Yeah,
think
well,
Derry
10
Fermanagh
10 football games.
Derry Fermanagh didn't set anyone's hair on fire.
A lot of goals. I mean, for what it was.
Okay. Paddy Andrews on the football pod was talking about how he was losing the will to live and that Tyrone Monaghan saved his weekend.
One-sided game as well. Like, you can't really do too much with that. Like, there's always going to be teams that are, and obviously they're trying to maybe come up with a system that lessens that a little bit. But there's going to be teams that are much better than others. I don't know. I have to say I was quite negative about it. And I actually thought your points last week were more nuanced than mine, I would say. But I watched Tyrone and Monaghan on Sunday and was thinking to myself, this is a great game in a sport that I enjoy, and I was unfair on it last week. And I think it's okay to say that. I thought that I was unfair. I do have a problem with some of the more negative, and it's not necessarily about the defending, it's about what the attacking team is trying to do against the defence. Whereas if you look at what Monaghan and Tyrone were doing, again, the defence possibly lent itself to this, but they were penetrating at all points. They weren't hanging around waiting for openings. They were trying to get inside. They were trying to get past that line, and it made for a really exciting game.
Yeah.
You know, and brilliant. That's the way we want it played. We want lads going for goals instead of fisting points. There's loads of things that could be better about football and the way it's played, and it was illustrated on Sunday, but it's probably unfair to say that that's how the game is always going to be, but it's also unfair to pick the bad game and say it's gone to the dogs because of this.
True.
Yeah.
Okay. Arthur, you wanted to touch on the Arsenal video, which has gone viral. If people haven't seen this video, I think we all have at this stage. You've seen it, Will?
You must have. I'm interested to know what the number is at now.
Michael,
there's a few million earlier today. Yeah.
Oh, is it that many?
Okay. Oh, I saw it at 5.
So I think the Arsenal social media people thought that they were capturing a lovely moment of what they thought was connection between team and fan.
Yeah.
And
I think they were thinking we've got a clip that's going to get lots of engagement.
Oh, really? You think they knew it wasn't good?
No, not that they didn't know it was good. I think they saw, here's a young supporter of Arsenal, here are the players walking by. Nobody's going to pay any great attention to this. They're going to say it's great that the players have stopped and signed their shirt.
Oh, yeah, okay.
What a nice little moment. Loads of retweets and likes.
Sorry, I thought when you meant engagement, you meant that it would be discussed the way it has been.
No. I don't think they would want to put out deliberately poor content. I don't think that was the intention.
So what happens is that a 10-year-old, and she turns out to be the mascot as well on the day, is holding a jersey with, I'm presuming, her father, but they're holding a jersey and the players are invited to sign it as they go by. And there's zero eye contact, there's zero interaction. They treat her as if she's a staff member and they're having to sign this for some kind of charity. And needless to say, many people took to Twitter. Everybody from Arthur O'D to Piers Morgan thought,
don't do that.
But they're the two people I've seen most vociferous.
Piers Morgan had a much smaller impact on it going viral than Arthur, but
indeed.
10.2 million on Twitter. I presume it's on other platforms too.
It's even exploded more today then.
The point was, would one of you not acknowledge that this is a 10-year-old girl as opposed to a staff member getting you to sign a jersey? So they just came along and they all signed it. I mean, they did.
She
their
looks
duty.
happy enough to me. I have to say.
She's watching one Arsenal star
I think
after
this is
another.
a bit overblown.
Did you not think it said something of the players?
I kind of feel like they have to do this stuff all the time, and they're going into the dressing room, they're off the bus. I'd imagine it's just like duty and they don't think too much about it. Like, they are about to play a match. I don't know. Zinchenko gives her a nice little smile after he finishes there.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, just he's kind of almost out of shot.
Arsenal have...
He wasn't playing though. That's why. You see, it's all about focus.
Brief to say that, Odegaard did chat
Fabian Vieira took ages doing it. He doesn't seem to
Odegaard did chat to her at another point.
Okay.
Yeah, they put out a video earlier,
Yeah, so they've been scrambling to show...
Scrambling and putting out extra video.
Did anyone look at the girl? Is there any eye contact we can muscle up and throw in?
Oh my God.
So what do you want to say, Arthur?
No, it's not. There's no great point to it. It's just it's.
All right, we'll take a break.
It's just a case of it's so maddening what those kind of club accounts do. Like, it's just so transparent, and it obviously works. And they all, well, I don't know. It's a little bit like we were talking about Gaelic football. Do they all do it because they see one or two doing it, and it's just a case that we have to be doing this, or is it a case where there are manifest gains from just putting out the most? And like useless kind of, not useless, like, but just the most meaningless thing. It's like an internal work, like whatever.
Careful.
But like a database with all the things. It's like, what was like the one that just stuck with me is like, was something about celebrating a happy St. Andrew's Day, and it's just a picture of Scott McTominay. Wasn't even born in Scotland. Just plays with him.
No.
I'm not saying, but he didn't grow up celebrating St. Andrew's Day, is my point.
No.
But it's just like, what's that?
Yes.
I'm just on the Arsenal one here randomly because I was looking at the video, and it's so funny because they've got 2 birthday messages, and basically for like two goalkeepers that are like the same guy. So they have a picture of Fabianski, and it's like, happy birthday, Lucas, and 2 pictures of him, and then right above it, an hour later, happy birthday, Wojciech, and it's Wojciech Jessy's birthday. It's just like 2 players that are gone from Arsenal however many years and like had minimal impact.
It's the easiest job in the world as well.
Yeah.
It is so straightforward.
You have a very uncritical audience as well who will lap up anything.
My God. All they want is that.
Yes. Yeah. The more inane, the better, it seems.
Yeah.
But who would you say got more likes, Fabianski or Szczesny?
Szczesny.
No, Fabianski 15.6 thousand, Szczesny 11.9.
Okay, we're getting off track here.
That's the point of the whole slot. But do you know what it reminded me as well, Joe, was a little bit of the end of the EFL Cup final. People remember the video there where there was a fan on the stairs under where the presentation area was, and a whole lot of players walked by.
At the Man United team?
Yeah. And next thing, Casemiro stops and gives a hug and kind of has a bit of a chat. And then I think Bruno Fernandes and Marcus Rashford directly after him copy his behaviour as he does it. So the first 6 or 7 players down just kind of walk past.
Yeah.
But once Casemiro stops, everyone follows suit.
Yeah.
I wonder if one of the Arsenal players had actually kind of stopped for a minute, maybe had a little bit of a chat, had a smile, maybe a hug with the girl in question. I reckon more of them would have followed the behaviour.
That's an interesting point, yeah.
But all in all, I don't think, I'm with Mick somewhat here, I don't think it's that big a deal. They did sign her shirt as they were going by. They didn't snub the girl as they were going past. It did feel cold though compared to...
I think it's fairly...
It's kind of bad until you realise that someone's filming it from the get-go though.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's not like this is just a nice organic moment.
Sure.
They're aware they're doing something with it. You think then they could go, at some point someone was, well, none of these guys are looking at her. Could just one or two of you just like,
not that she's a person.
Pat in the head, something.
I thought it didn't speak well of them. And I think I would take Will's point. I think if one of them had engaged with her and pat on the head and a smile, the others just in an automatic robotic way would have imitated that. This is what we do. Because sometimes former players can look a little bit bitter when they talk about the modern day player as being robotic and not able to think for themselves or act for themselves. And I thought that video spoke to that actually.
How many 23-year-old kids, whatever, 23-year-old guys, would you know that would be comfortable having interactions with a 10-year-old girl?
Except that too.
Like there is a little bit of that in it. Like it's it's almost the most awkward age you are for that.
They came across
as
kids themselves.
Yeah.
It was like teenagers.
They are,
they did come across as teenagers, not sure how to behave.
Yeah.
I give you that. I suspect if Arteta, a man in his 40s,
exactly, just had that little bit of experience and confidence.
To be fair, there is that too. There is that too.
There was a lovely video in the week. You know those when outside Carrington where all the United cars drive in. I don't know what day of the week it was, but there was one with Ten Hag. Funnily enough, with a young kind of fan who came up and just like, I don't know who filmed that actually, but it was brilliant. It was just one of those really lovely exchanges where he kind of completely got it. I don't know if he has children himself, but he just understood, I suppose, what the brief was as such.
Yes.
All in all, it's a lot less cynical when it's, say, another fan maybe filming the interaction at the car as opposed to a social media team who are going around with their camera on their gimbal and making sure they get lots of shots which they can stick up on social media afterwards. Which are, at this point, I'm really surprised they didn't look at it and go, this one isn't great. Let's just let this one hit the cutting room floor and we'll use a different video. But it does, to an extent, speak of the massive gulf between the Premier League and, say, football on a smaller level as well. That if you went to a League of Ireland ground and players were coming out, I think they'd fairly happily stop and take a picture, sign an autograph for kids and have a chat with them.
Yeah.
But in a way, the Premier League is just kind of
it's a question of scale, You just can't stop for every kid when you're a Premier League footballer.
But like when Joe Canning, who was the best at it, but there's plenty more, there's like most GA players even do it, like will stop and sign every hurley and every sliotar and every, and they're getting such huge praise for that. But like they're also like, I don't think they're having chats out there or conversations. They're doing it because they feel that it's their duty to like the players want or the fans want a little bit of them, and they want to give that back. And it's like there's no badness in it, whatever, but they're not sitting there like having chats and asking them did they enjoy the match today or anything like that either. You know, it's a very different thing, but it's you know, I do feel that we, you know, I don't know.
You know,
I genuinely don't know what
the inane blandness of the accounts that irked you. What's the alternative though? Just don't put out anything.
No, I understand they have to, but I love the fact, you know, where they're really tested during an international window. And they're watching all the games. And they're like, oh, well done, Palestri. Comes on for Uruguay.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're really earning your money.
You should see the European Tour golf Twitter account. You know, like they will have Ryder Cup stuff 365 days a year and any tenuous link, you know.
Do you
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to ask, do you like when they put out, like, you know, if like Manchester United have lost 3-1 at home to Fulham and they put up full time and it's like 1-3 and it's a picture of Fernandez with his fist in the air.
They read it better than that. They never see those. It has happened.
It's not far off, and some clubs maybe are worse at it than United.
It's so it's so that's so funny when they're trying to sell. They have to sell bad news.
But you also have to, like, you can't just stop reporting it once you go 2-1 down either. Like, you do have to have some consistency to it.
I actually quite enjoy, particularly when GA accounts stop tweeting once their team go behind.
Oh my God,
I'm so enthusiastic up to a point.
I like that. It's like the Wild West there. There's no one, if you stop doing it, like you often go onto pages and you're like, I can't believe they've not updated the score here.
The amount of times I would check Clare GA score, say through the club in question, and it'd be like Instagram story, and I'd see the half-time score, and I'd know that the full-time score not being there meant they lost, but I wouldn't know by how much.
And the old classic on Twitter is it would go up afterwards, sorry, ran out of battery, conveniently on the one day we lose.
Slightly unconnected but connected in a way. Did you see the shot of Ryan Reynolds with Ben Foster after that Wrexham game that you were watching the other week?
No, I don't think I saw anything after the game.
It's this photo here where you see they're having this amazing moment if you haven't seen it.
Oh yeah.
And it's Ryan Reynolds, like his hands on Foster's shoulders, and someone's managed to get a photo of it, and he's like, you know, he's staring him in the eye like only a Hollywood actor could. You know, I'd say, you know, US presidents and Ryan Reynolds make you feel like you're the only person in the room, you know, and he's like in awe. But then the full picture when it zooms out is there's a camera crew and a guy with a boom thing standing over them, and the whole thing is just Ryan Reynolds in character as Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah,
it's just like he's nothing real anymore.
But this is what I was actually going to talk about that Wrexham thing. We never actually spoke about it on the night, but I watched that Wrexham Notts County game, and it was an amazing atmosphere, and there is something to be said for the Wrexham fans getting this, like, after years in the like wilderness, because it was a full house, like, but they were there, and I was thinking to myself the whole way through, it was like, stop being a cynical idiot. This is a Netflix documentary, you know what I mean? It's all fake and it's all this.
Disney documentary.
Exactly what you're saying. Disney, sorry. But like, you're hitting yourself in the head, almost like not allowing yourself to enjoy it because you almost feel the need to not be sucked in by nonsense. But it's like, then I was like, there's another part of me that's just like, can I not just like enjoy it for what it is? It's kind of cool, even if it is just a story.
Yeah.
Even if it is just fake, there's something still. Again, for those Wrexham fans who went there, who haven't had anything since they beat Arsenal in 1993, you know, that was like a packed house, a racehorse ground, beating their rivals in a thriller of a game, and it was something that was like, it's definitely the best the conference is ever going to be.
Mm.
You know, so there is upsides to it as well, even if it is all cynical and rubbish behind it all.
I think you keep your cynicism.
Yeah.
Hold on to it. It's not, I don't think it's to be celebrated.
I don't either. It brings me out.
I'm not saying celebrated, but I suppose enjoyed in the moment.
No.
Like, I was very cynical when they signed Ben Foster, because obviously he is a massive social media presence and a big podcast.
Ridiculous twerk to it. Like, you know, it's all of a sudden, you know, you're bringing in Ben Foster, former England keeper, former Man United
keeper. Can I
keeper.
ask what's wrong with it though? Because there's investment that comes in out of nowhere in all the other leagues and everywhere else as well.
It's just like we're losing all authenticity in like across our lives because we're recording everything.
Yeah,
everyone's just behaving.
I would agree with that.
Weird ways, and
totally.
You know, so it's an extension of that. But that's at a kind of very visible big level, but like right down to on the ground, there's just something weird happening in the last 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's even like the LeBron point that got him the record, when there's only one guy, the CEO of Nike, who's sitting there without a camera phone.
Oh yeah,
and that's because he has a photographer beside him taking the moment anyway.
That was the great thing about that, is that everyone was like, look at the one guy who's taking it in, and then it turned out he'd hired like a camera crew to film him watching it. So even he's not really in the moment. I thought we're doomed.
I do feel that, like, if you go to a gig or something, or even a match now, It's like, it is, it's like, are you seeing any of this? And are you ever even going to watch these videos back?
It's funny you say that.
Because I've millions of videos of my kids that I never even watch because I've millions of them.
I know.
Do you know?
I was at the 100 metres in 2012 and I recorded it. And I made it, like I held it up to record it, but you can't not but glance down just to make sure you are recording it. And obviously it doesn't go on for very long, less than 10 seconds. And
it's the shortest race ever, in fact.
I did manage to watch it, but a good 30-40% of my attention was on moving my hand and filming it and looking up, and I wouldn't say I've ever watched that video since.
No. Were you filming it for social or just to have it as a memory?
Memory.
Okay. It was barely social then, really, was there? Not in the same way.
I'm sure you could have found it on YouTube.
I don't even think I was on then. On Twitter, I can't remember. But no, it was like, it's such a blue ribboned, iconic event. I thought, this would be a great thing to have. But
yeah.
It's bleak. I find it bleak now when you're at an event and you do see it happening. You do kind of feel out of touch with the people around you.
Yeah.
There's no impetus in me to do that. And
I just think you have to resist.
And it's just, you do. It kind of feels like people aren't taking that as seriously. As something, to that effect. And you feel quite snobbish and isolated with it, but it isn't really any...
No. I appreciate when someone gets good footage. Like last year, Munster final, Tony Kelly hits the sideline cut. It was a much better camera angle from the stand as opposed to what the TV got. But for the best part, the 4K cameras that are there and the professional teams are going to get much better footage than you ever get.
It's just to show you were there, isn't it? It's like right, I'm going to Bruce Springsteen in a couple of weeks in the RDS, right? And it was like, even as I've seen him for 20 years now, every time you see, it's more and more like you don't even want to be singing at the gig anymore because you'll just be on someone's phone sounding like a out of tune moron. Do you know, like constantly, it just feels like everything is just on display and everything is for the act of what's going to be on my phone rather than just being in the moment and in what is like an amazing immersive experience, and it's becoming less and less so every time.
And I can understand why some artists are basically having you have to give your phone over before you go in.
Tiernan did that a couple of weeks ago actually. But then back to that authenticity point, all of our behaviour then is so performative that I just don't even know what's real anymore.
Yeah.
At those concerts, are you really having this good a time, or are you just making sure that you're...
But I'm almost the opposite. I'm almost like, it's like almost like I'm not putting myself out there and just like letting myself have a good time. But yeah, 100% it works the other way as well, yeah.
But I'm not above having the instinct sometimes. If I'm at something, I think to myself, I want to get a photo and actually maybe I want to put this on my social media, and I have to fight that instinct. So I understand. I'm not there going, I can't even relate to these people with their camera phones. I understand that instinct or that inclination to capture it, and it's like, yeah. And now I've never wanted to take a picture of my food, but again,
you just eating in the wrong restaurants, or
maybe. But when it arrives and you're having a great time, I do understand people going, No,
but do you know what? Like you'll see it now. You are seeing it, I'm sure. But like your kids is an interesting one because you want to document it. You want to remember them when they're like at different ages and all that. But you become a thing where you're, instead of documenting it so that you see that bit in your memories, you're documenting everything and you were experiencing nothing. And it's such an important thing. It's like, the early walking and stuff like that. And this is like, oh, she's after doing it, I don't have the phone out. Do you know what I mean? It's like, well, maybe enjoy the fact that she's just taken the few steps, and that this is a big moment, and you have a thing called a memory.
Yeah.
That I feel is like we're all losing as well in a way because we're relying on the documentary evidence all the time.
Like wouldn't it be interesting if it turned out one of those Arsenal players who is sick of like the social media team following him around at all times and documenting everything, not to mention the Amazon documentary, was like, you put the phone away, so can I just talk to the girl without you in my face? Who knows, maybe one of them was like, if I talk to her, it's going to be a big thing, some video in it. They might be saying, wait until you go away and then I'll talk to her in private. That could be part of their thinking as well. Like, they must resent cameras on them at all times.
Yeah.
Especially
when they've no need for it.
Yeah.
It doesn't benefit them in any great way at all.
Really.
There's such a cynicism that's so built in us, even on stuff like that. So, say like when Joe Biden was in Ballina, there was like 2 or 3 moments where they were very much this wasn't for the cameras, this was on its own, say at the hospice, or when he met that priest who gave his brother or his son, the last rites, right? But the other part of me is listening to that and going, how come I know about this?
Yeah.
You know, why is this being reported everywhere and so on if it was such a private and non-political and everything moment? I don't know which one of them is true. I'd like to think it was that it was this private moment that was nothing to do with publicity. But I can't help that voice in my head that's thinking, why do I know about it? It's the same with everything. Anything that's done privately, like, it's almost like nobody can win anymore because we have this inbuilt cynicism in us.
Anyway, that was the
What are we
Arsenal
talking
video.
about?
Yeah, we're just we are tangenting a touch too much there, perhaps. But that was the Arsenal video.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.